Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku was in murder drones and fell for Uzi? This story is Unraveling in mezzo droni by Marcellocaselli. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button, as your one like motivates me to bring more stories, and subscribe the channel if you are new so you won't miss our latest videos. By now, the training classes at the Hero High School were over and the various students could return to their dormitories or go out to have fun. All except for one specific green-haired boy who was still wearing his hero uniform that his mother had created for him. He was Izuku Midoriya, the successor to All Might as the future symbol of peace and the ninth bearer of the quirk called One for All. He was heading towards a specific area of his school, namely the laboratory of Mei Hatsume, a young inventor from the support department. The day before, the girl had asked Izuku to visit her laboratory because she had created something that she said would change the hero society forever, but she had to do a test. The UA student wasn't too sure about this since almost all of Mei's inventions ended up exploding or causing damage, but he still wanted to give this one a chance. Once inside the laboratory, he noticed that it was messier than usual. On the floor there were pieces of iron of all kinds, such as bolts, electrical wires, and pipes, and on the walls there were gigantic oil stains that gave off a not exactly pleasant smell. And in the center of the room, there she was. Mei Hatsume, a young girl with shoulder-length pink hair, golden yellow eyes, a strange pair of glasses she used for her creations, and her usual black, oil-stained t-shirt. As soon as the pink-haired girl notices her friend, Guinea Pig, she smiles and happily exclaims, "Midoriya. Here you are, thanks for coming." "You're welcome, Mei. What was it you wanted to show me anyway?" asks the hero in training, walking towards the inventor, who says, "Come on, I'll show you." So the two headed towards a large structure covered by a white sheet, which was quickly pulled down by the girl, revealing a large black square box 6 meters wide and 2 meters long. In the center there was a sort of door without a handle with a red button next to it. What is this?" Izuku asks confusedly as he looks at the geometric object. "This baby is the prototype of what I like to call a hero transportation device," says the green-haired inventor, stroking the machine. "And what's it supposed to do?" asks the green-haired boy. "It's simple. This little gem is able to teleport itself and anyone inside it in a second. It could be a great help to the heroes to quickly reach areas that would normally take longer to reach," Mei explains with pride in her voice. "Really? It's incredible. Something like this could change society forever, but does it work?" asks Izuku. "And here's where you come in, my friend. You'll be the first to test the hero transportation device, and before you say anything, I swear, this baby won't explode. It's 100% safe." "Okay, 90%, but that's still a lot," the inventor says, pressing the red button. Once done, the door to the big cube swings open. The UA student looks at his friend's car doubtfully for a few seconds, then sighs and says, "Okay, I trust you," before walking toward the square car. The inside of the machine was basically a large black room with a sort of keyboard with various buttons in the center. "Okay, this test will be simple. Right now, I'm entering the coordinates to teleport you straight to the front of the school, and if you hypothetically end up somewhere else, just press the blue button," Mei explains as she enters some coordinates on the keyboard and points to the aforementioned blue button. "Got it," says the ninth OFA bearer. So the pink-haired inventor comes out of the cube, closes the door and says from outside, "Okay, Midoriya. Now press the green button." Izuku sighs and presses the blue button, and in a second the entire square structure disappears in a flash of light. The inventor smiled with satisfaction and walked towards a window that showed the entrance to the school for heroes, ready to see the black cube, but her smile immediately disappeared when she saw that there was nothing there. The girl quickly heads back to her lab only to see that the machine hadn't returned there. "Oh, damn," Mei says, slightly worried. Meanwhile, in another universe, in an unknown location completely covered in snow, a large flash of light occurs, extremely brief but bright enough to attract the attention of many individuals in the area. Izuku heard a strange noise of snowfall and decided to open the door of the black cube, and his eyes widened in shock when he saw that in front of him was not the heroic high school of his dreams but a gigantic expanse of snow, where in the distance there was a sort of abandoned city, and in the sky a completely white Saturn was visible, which was absolutely impossible. What? Where the hell am I? What is this place?" the green-haired boy wonders, then remembers the directions from the support girl and rushes back to the black cube, closes the door, and dives for the keyboard. He quickly presses the blue button hoping with all his heart that it would work, but unfortunately it doesn't. No, 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 screams the UA student as he desperately presses the button, but the result is always the same, nothing. After finally giving in, Izuku begins to have a panic attack over the whole situation, but it is suddenly interrupted by a female English voice in the distance. Another pod. Damn, the company really loves sending out these damn murder drones, the voice says in an annoyed tone. The hero in training approaches the closed door and puts his ear to it to better hear the approaching voice. Though, this is different, and they don't usually come with a flash of light. This is strange, says the voice that was now right in front of the door. The green-haired boy didn't really know what to do. He didn't know if he should trust her and open the door. As far as he knew, there was a ruthless villain on the other side of the story, and even if that wasn't what she said, it didn't make sense. Murder drones. What the hell were they in the first place? I wonder what happens if I press this, says the voice, and a few moments later the door slides aside, forcing the two to meet. To the hero's surprise, there wasn't a human in front of him, but a sort of humanoid robot with neon purple eyes and short, dull purple hair. She wore a black striped hat with a sparkly bauble on the tip, and black boots with long, dark purple striped socks. She also wore a black sweatshirt with a white emblem on the front depicting a battery with two bones running through it, creating an X shape. The bottom of the sweatshirt had two white stripes running around it, and the left sleeve had a white radioactive symbol. Underneath the sweatshirt was a short, ruffled black skirt. In her hand, she held some kind of strange rifle, and she had a bored expression on her face. His bored expression immediately disappears when he makes eye contact with the hero in training and is replaced by one full of shock. After a few seconds of silence, the two looked into each other's eyes and processed each other's existence. Finally, the silence was broken by the robot girl, who let out a quick scream and then pointed the rifle at the human, making him step back slightly in fear. "You a human. What are you doing here? How are you still alive?" asks the robot, pointing the gun at Izuku's face. He says, "I ended up here by mistake, and I don't know what's going on here." "Well then, give me one good reason not to blow your head off right now," says the robot, preparing to pull the trigger. Well, I didn't do anything to you. That gun doesn't even look real, since I've never seen one like that. And because I'm cute, asks the green-haired teenager. Hearing this on the screen face of the robot girl, the sign of blushing cheeks forms and she lowers the weapon slightly. "Well, technically, he's right, he's pretty cute. Wait, no. No, he's a human Uzi. Damn digital hormones." Thinks the time is known. Uzi thinks to himself and then points the rifle towards the hero, but is interrupted by a sort of mechanical roar that attracts the attention of the two. Izuku activates his quirk as the robot aims her rifle into the darkness of the snowy night. From the darkness comes out a large robot with a round body. It walks on two legs and has two arms that end in sharp claws, and it had a single large glowing red eye that was heading towards the two in a menacing manner. "Stay back, you damn scrapper. You're about to get a taste of my new electromagnetic rifle that will turn you into scrap. You'll be the first of many. And once I'm done with you and the other scrappers, it'll be the murder drone's turn," says the purple-haired girl before pulling the trigger. Suddenly, however, the gun begins to overheat and make unsettling noises, and Uzi, frightened, throws the gun away, which explodes after a few seconds. The robot then looks back at the other robot who was reaching for her and says, "Oh, bite me." But before the other robot could do anything, Izuku comes out of the black cube, runs towards the robot and gives it a strong punch using 15% of One for All, throwing it into the air. The purple-haired robot looks at what the human has done and falls to the ground in surprise. The iron monster lands on a large rock, smashing its body and disabling it. But suddenly two more robots appear out of nowhere and growl at the green-haired boy. One was rather short with a skeletal torso, long claws, and its head was a projector with glowing eyes. The other was very robust with various objects implanted on its back and had the appearance of a diving suit. The shorter one runs towards Izuku to attack him, but he responds by kicking him hard in the head using 20% of his power. The impact rips the robot's head off, killing him instantly. The diving suit monster grabs the human and throws him into the air, but he uses float to slow his fall and launches his black whip tentacles, which wrap around the enemy. Once completely wrapped, he pulls him towards him, and as soon as he gets close to him, the UA student hits him on the chest using 15% OFA, making him crash to the ground not far from Uzi, who gasps in shock. Thanks to float, he lands on the monster's chest and then crushes its eyes using 20% on its foot, breaking them and deactivating it. What the hell? How the hell did he do that? A human can't do something like that. Calm down, it's okay. You just found out there's a human still alive here, and with strange powers. He destroyed 3 junkyards. In a damn cool way, I might add. Oh damn hormones. Thinks the robot. Then the UA student looks at the robot and offers her his hand, asking, "Are you okay?" Uzi looks at the hand doubtfully for a few moments before grabbing the hand and saying, "Why yeah, I'm fine. What the hell was that?" That was my quirk. You know, I'm an aspiring hero," says the green-haired boy. Hearing this, the robot tilts her head in confusion and says, hero. You know what, it doesn't matter. Why, you literally destroyed 3 junkyards with no effort. Don't you know what a hero is? And what a junker is?" asks the hero in training. Bite me. Listen, let's go back inside your weird cube thing so we can talk better. It's not safe out here, says Uzi. Okay, that makes sense to me, says the UA student, opening the car door, which had closed automatically in the meantime. So the two enter the hero transportation device. Izuku didn't know why, but he had the feeling that he was no longer in Japan, or in his world. Okay, let's start with the basics. What's your name? Asks the purple-haired robot. My name is Izuku Midoriya, replies the teenage hero. Well, I'm Uzi Dorman. Second question, how did you get here? Asks the robot. I was testing my friend's invention. I was supposed to teleport in front of my school, but instead I ended up here, and now I want to ask a question. Where is here? Says the UA student. You're on the planet Copper 9. This place was once ruled by humans, but those gods blew themselves up. From the rubble of their labor, we emerged, the worker drones who began to live their lives and create families. But the J.C. Jensen Company didn't like this, which is why one day they sent what they called disassembler drones to the planet, even though we prefer to call them murder drones. As soon as they arrived, they began to exterminate us, and as if that weren't enough, an army of mechanical monsters called scrappers also appeared. Their sole objective is to tear us apart to use them to create more scrappers. That's why we were forced to hide underground to avoid being exterminated, Uzi explains. This is terrible, and also unfair, says Izuku, feeling bad for the worker drones. It already sucks so damn much, but I better go, I have to get home, and if I were you, I wouldn't leave here anyway, Uzi says as he heads for the door. Why? I can't see come with you, asks the green-haired boy. I don't think that's a good idea. The other worker drones don't look kindly on humans, says the purple-haired drone. Well, I guess that makes sense, says the hero in training as he scratches the back of his head. Anyway, if I were you, I wouldn't leave this pod, not only because you'd freeze to death, but because you could be killed by the murder drones, and believe me, they're much worse than the wreckers, and by the way, you have to be careful of them too. The one you faced before was just a small patrol, usually they're much more numerous, says the drone, opening the door to the black square. Okay, thanks for the advice, Uzi, says Izuku, slightly embarrassed and with red cheeks from embarrassment. Why yes, anything. Anyway, I'll come back to see you. Not because I care about you obviously, I just want to ask you about the Earth and those powers of yours, says Uzi, also slightly blushing before leaving and closing the door behind her, leaving the UA student alone with his thoughts and the sound of the snow hitting May's mechanical device. After a few seconds, Izuku leans his back against a wall and kneels on the ground, saying to himself, Guys, Mom, Eri, All Might, I'll find a way to get back to you, I promise. To say that things at UA were tense would be an understatement. Ever since May had told the teachers and the principal what had happened to Izuku, many had been panicking. The news of the aspiring peace symbol had remained confidential. The only people who knew about the accident were May, the teachers, the principal, the green-haired boy's class, and of course his mother, who was currently heading straight for the Hero High School. At this moment we can see the teachers sitting in the principal's office. Everyone was silent, a silence that was broken by Inko Misoriya, aka Izuku's mother, who burst into the room and fell to the floor, screaming, Where is my son? All the teachers looked at the little mouse-like being who was staring bitterly at the window, and after a few moments of hesitation he said, "That's what we're trying to find out, Ms. Midoriya." What does that mean? Don't you have some kind of chip in his costume or something? Asks the green-haired woman as she gets up. Yes, in theory, but since young Midoriya disappeared, the detector in his hero suit stopped working, but we're looking for him all over the planet, Nezu finally says, looking at the desperate woman. So I just have to wait and hope they magically find it. Says the plump woman, waving her hands. Please calm down, Mrs. Midoriya. Young May is working tirelessly to track down the machine her son was in, says a skeletal, blonde-haired man. She was the former #1 hero, symbol of peace, 8th bearer of One for All, Toshinori Yagi aka All Might. Suddenly May entered the principal's office looking terrible. Her jeans, her black dress and even her hair were covered in dust and oil, and her breathing was extremely heavy. Young Hatsume, do you have any news on young Midoriya's current whereabouts? Asks Nezu, looking at the inventor. Yes, I more or less managed to track him down, says the girl between one heavy breath and the next. Do you know where my son is? Inko asks, full of fear and hope. May looks at the plump woman in front of him with pity and says, in a way, yes, but it's better if you follow me to my laboratory so I can explain the situation better. So Nezu, All Might, Inko and the teacher of the first class Shota Aizawa follow the young inventor to her laboratory, which was even dirtier and messier than it was before. After a few hours of research, I managed to figure out where my invention had teleported to. It was programmed to teleport itself and Izuku to the front of the school, but there was a small malfunction in the transportation system, May explains. So where is he? Says the former peace symbol. The girl sighs and says, the problem is, he's no longer in this world unfortunately. Everyone is confused by the inventor's statements and Aizawa asks, what does that mean? Apparently that weird multiverse theory isn't so weird. The malfunction briefly connected our universe to another and the machine teleported to the coordinates I entered, but of that world, the pink-haired girl finishes. Another world? Are you telling me my son is all alone stuck in another world he doesn't know and doesn't know how to get back to? Inko asks desperately as she begins to cry. Aizawa, please escort Mrs. Midoriya to her house, the principal says to the black-haired man, who nods and escorts the green-haired woman out of the room. Then the humanoid mouse turns to May again and says, young Hatsume, are you able to recreate the machine and connect it to that universe? The inventor girl waits a few seconds to answer but then says, yes, I think so, but it would take me a long time to recreate it and I have no idea how to connect it to another universe. Then the UA principal turned to the former #1 hero saying, Toshinori, I want you to get in touch with David Shield and his daughter Melissa so that they can help young Hatsume recover young Midoriya as soon as possible and inform Aizawa to intensify his class's training. We don't know what kind of world your successor has ended up in. Sure, I'll call him right away, All Might said, then took his phone from his pocket and left the room. Hold on young Midoriya, we're coming to save you, the principal thinks to himself, not knowing that his student wasn't having a bad time. Meanwhile in the Murder Drones universe. Now we can see Izuku together with Uzi who were talking inside the hero transportation device. So let me get this straight, you're basically from another universe and that would explain why the planet's atmosphere didn't kill you here, and in your world most humans have some kind of superpowers or something, right? Asks the purple-haired drone. Yes, exactly, and now people use their powers called quirks to become heroes. I'm a hero too. Or rather an aspiring one. I still have to finish my first year, says the UA student. Damn, your world sure is better off than mine, comments the robot girl rolling her eyes to the sky. But what about you? You're the daughter of the leader of your colony, and you usually go out to scavenge for parts for weapons to use to defeat the scrap dealers and murder drones. Asks the green-haired boy. Exactly, but you forgot the part about saving the world, says the worker drone with a hint of pride in her voice. It's very dangerous, you could get hurt or worse, says Izuku slightly worried. Look, I can't just stay underground and hide like rabbits, so if you have any objections to what I do you can bite me. Uzi states annoyed as she crosses her arms. The human remains silent for a few seconds and then says, hey, I have an idea, I can help you, attracting the attention of the robot, who tilts her head in confusion and asks, what do you say? We could go together and look for parts for your weapon, so I can protect you and at the same time find some technology to fix the car and get home, Izuku suggests. The worker drone is taken aback for a few seconds, then blushes slightly and says, "Why would you want to protect me?" "Well, it's my duty as a hero to protect those who need help, whether they're humans or drones," the green-haired boy says, then offers his hand to the girl and asks, "Are you up for it, then?" Uzi thinks for a few seconds before saying, "Okay, deal done, but don't get any strange ideas. I'm only accepting your offer because you don't seem too bad for a human, and there's actually a high chance you'll get killed while scavenging for parts, especially since the scrap dealers are starting to get more active than usual." So the two shake hands and seal an agreement. Izuku doesn't know why, but he feels quite comfortable with Uzi, and secretly the feeling is mutual and she doesn't really know why either. It had been 5 days since Izuku found himself in this cold, post-apocalyptic new world, and things were going more or less well. He and Uzi had gone exploring the ruins of the planet Copper 9 in search of resources for her weapons and a way to get him home. Unfortunately, this last objective was not yet achieved, but at least the two had found warm clothing to combat the polar cold and food supplies to avoid dying of hunger or thirst. In their adventures outside they had not yet seen a murder drone, only a few scrap dealers, and they too were mainly in the ruins of the city. During these excursions the human and the drone had become quite close. The robot girl had finally lowered most of the hostilities as she began to trust completely. The two could now consider themselves friends. At this moment the hero in training was sitting on the floor inside the hero transporter device while looking at a photo of him in his class that he kept safe in one of the pockets of his hero costume's belt. "Guys, I really miss you so much," the green-haired boy thinks to himself bitterly. Izuku's musings are interrupted by the door opening. As usual it was Uzi holding his new prototype rifle. "Hey, sorry I'm late, I kind of got caught by my dad, but I managed to convince him I just wanted to study one of the outside doors. I still can't believe he fell for it," says the girl with purple hair. "I see, and why do you have a wrench there?" asks the hero in training, pointing to the tool the worker drone had in his pocket. "Oh, this. My dad gave it to me. He says he used this thing to make his first door, and to put my mother out of her misery when the murder drones attacked her with acid," the robot says. "Oh man, Uzi, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean to bring back bad memories," the UA student says sadly. No, it's all fine. Honestly, I don't remember much about her, anyway. It's better if we go. I didn't see any scrap dealers on the way here," the drone says to the hero, taking the opportunity to ask a question. "Speaking of the wreckers, where did they come from? The murder drones were sent by this agency you're talking about, but what about them?" asks the green-haired human. "Well, they're robots created by another robot. The humans who lived here created it to be a kind of walking miniature factory. None of us have ever seen it in person, only the robots it created. But when all the humans on the planet died out, this robot decided that he and his army should be the only inhabitants of Copper 9, so he started building robots made exclusively to destroy the drones. We don't know his name, but we call him the Toymaker." Uzi explains. "Oh, I see, it looks really dangerous," says the UA student. "No shit. Now let's go. The parts for my electromagnetic rifle are waiting for us," says the girl, pointing to her firearm. Not too long later, the two had been wandering around in the snow for a few minutes and everything was going well until they found a pod near a large pile of worker drone corpses. "Do you think this is?" asks Izuku, slightly intimidated by the sight of the corpses. "Yes, this must be the murder drone's base," replies the robot girl as she picks up a torn robot arm and throws it away in disgust before grabbing a green battery. Suddenly they both hear the sound of something big flying. "Hide." The two hide behind a machine and at that moment a disassembler drone lands on the pod and crushes the head of a worker drone. The being had a humanoid body with a long tail, large skeletal wings, and in place of eyes there was a large yellow X on the screen. The monster notices the two and starts flying towards them. Izuku activates Black Whip and some tentacles come out from his legs and head towards the enemy who, however, dodges them and cuts some of them with his claws. Meanwhile, Uzi runs towards the green battery and inserts it into his rifle, which begins to load. The murder drone flies past the UA student and heads towards the worker drone, but he promptly grabs it by the tail and with 5% OFA knocks it to the ground. The monster quickly gets up again, but Uzi steps in front of him, points the rifle in his face and shouts, "Bite me," before pulling the trigger. Immediately after, a green laser beam comes out of the tip of the rifle and disintegrates the head of the disassembler drone, which falls to the ground dead. "Yes, yes," says the robot girl triumphantly and proudly, "you did it, Uzi. You did great," says the hero in training, making the drone blush at the compliments. But suddenly the disassembler drone gets back up and its head starts to grow back, terrifying them both. Uzi fires again. Izuku says, stepping in front of the girl, who panics and says, "I can't. It's still reloading." The iron monster's head has now almost completely regenerated, and before the hero in training could do anything, the green-haired girl takes a torn drone arm and slams it in his face, making him recoil slightly. "Ouch, did you hit me with your arm?" asks the murder drones as he rubs his injured cheek. "You talk," the hero and the drone ask in unison, shocked. "Ah, my head hurts and you don't think you remember the last 3 hours of my life. Oh, are you two new members of the team by any chance?" The robot asks in a friendly tone, seeming not to recognize them. "I'm serial designation N. Nice to meet you. I'm more or less the leader of the gang. Okay, it's not true, everyone tells me I'm useless and terrible. However, you think you suffer from amnesia, but don't worry, I'm sure it will sort itself out," says the now known N, giving a military salute. Izuku and Uzi look at each other for a few seconds and the former says, "Excuse us for a moment," before turning around and turning the girl around too. "I have an idea. We make him talk to us. We make him believe that we are new disassembler drones and we have them explain how things work, like if they are planning an attack on your colony, or we can even have them reveal their weaknesses," the US student whispers to the worker drone. "You're a genius. Okay, let's do it," whispers the robot with a mischievous smile on her face. "Excuse me guys, are you finished whispering?" "Not that feeling left out bothers me, of course," says the murder suspect. The two quickly turn around and Uzi said in a friendly tone to the enemy, "Hey buddy, why don't we go to that pod over there?" "Oh sure, I love doing everything," N says happily as he leads the human and the worker drone inside the pod. But what no one had noticed was that the entire scene had been witnessed by two wreckers hiding behind a snowbank. One had the appearance of a humanoid reptile made of white metal with red lights. Its tail was about 2.5 meters long and ended in a spear point, and on one of its arms were installed blades. The other one was smaller and looked like a mechanical skull with blood-red eyes and a half-torso that ended with 4 long, pointed spider legs. The spider wrecker is about to head towards the pod, but the reptile puts a hand in front of him to block him. The monster emits mechanical sounds similar to the sound of an iguana and then points with his finger to a spot in the middle of the snow, that is, the ruined city. The skull robot looks at his partner, nods, and starts running through the snow quickly toward the city. The lizard robot looks at its companion for a few seconds and then returns to observe the pod with a look full of hatred and contempt. At this moment, we can see Izuku, Uzi, and N inside the latter's pod. The hero and the worker drone were visibly nervous about the situation and were afraid that at any moment the murder drone's visual sensors would return to normal and it would attack them. "Hey, you mentioned other members of your group earlier, will they be back soon?" The worker drone asks with a slightly nervous smile. "Why yes, it would be really nice to meet the other work colleagues," adds the US student also with a slightly nervous tone. "Oh yeah, the others are out hunting right now. You know, with those worker drones around we have to go out looking for them a lot. I'm sure you'll love them." Meanwhile there's V. She's absolutely our most skilled and determined warrior. "She and I are great friends and she's just adorable," says the murder drone. Flashback. We see another disassembly drone, this one a girl who looks a lot like N. She has a black headband with 5 sections of lights and a long black tail that ends in a large syringe containing highly potent acid. She wears a short, black, short-sleeved coat with a fur collar and cuffs. Her legs are painted black up to her thighs, resembling thigh-high socks. She is standing in front of a dying worker drone who screams in terror, "Please don't make me eat my own guts in front of my family." But the robot girl doesn't listen to him and proceeds to brutally tear him to pieces before smiling maniacally and saying, "And yet, I don't feel anything." Then N appears behind her and says in an embarrassed tone, "So V, oh, I heard this toxic storm is going to be extremely inhospitable tonight." But the boy looks at him confused and says confusedly, "Huh? Who the hell are you? And then quickly flies away. Don't worry, it's a whole letter. I know it's a lot to remember, says the murder drone with a nervous laugh. Fine flashback. He seems like a nice guy, says the hero in training. Yeah, there's a lot of mutual respect between us, even though I admit I have a little crush on her, so please don't tell her. The robot boy says, embarrassed. Izuku and Uzi make a tight-lipped sign, making it clear that the secret is safe with them. And then there's our leader Jay. She's a really fantastic person, continues the disassembling drone. Flashback. We can see Jay holding N down with his foot while saying, "You are absolutely useless, thanks," replies the robot boy, making the leader growl. She has neon yellow eyes and silver hair in 2 braids tied with black ribbons. She appears to be wearing a short-sleeved dress with side pockets and a black leather belt. She also wears knee-high stockings with visible suspenders. If only the company would let me, I'd tear off your wings and let the scrappers brutally tear you to pieces, and honestly, I'd enjoy the scene while drinking the oil from my last kill, the robot girl says in a scornful tone. Fine flashback. It's really cool. Oh, I'll show you around. Outside there are the dead bodies, the wall, and here are the buttons, says N as he starts randomly pressing buttons on a keyboard. Wait a second, this isn't a capsule, this is a ship, we can use it to get off this planet, says Uzi, taking a closer look inside the structure. Wait, if we get to the Earth of this universe, we might find a way to get back home. Izuku thinks to himself, full of hope. It's more of a single-use missile. They never taught us how to fly it before they sent us here, says the murder drone, but I mean, the worker drones can help us out, instead of brutally slaughtering them. Why are we doing this again? Says the purple-haired robot. Yeah, well, they never really did anything bad to us, right? Adds the UA student. Well, besides having to drink their tasty and hot oil so I don't overheat and die, I just like to be useful and then we just follow orders, explains N. Many people have done extremely terrible things without thinking twice, and they were following orders, says the hero in training, giving the disassembler drone pause. Yeah, and following orders has gotten you nothing but disrespect. What do you think the company will do when we're done? Asks the robot girl. The murder drone is like, wow, you two really look like rebels, which sounds like fun, but not as much as following orders. But the conversation is interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the snow, which makes N turn towards a small window where 2 figures can be seen approaching. Hey, V and J must be back, can I introduce you to them? Says the yellow-eyed robot, but when he turns around he sees that Izuku and Uzi have disappeared. In fact, the two are silent and are now running as far away from the pod as possible. What do we do now? Asks the UA student. Let's go to my colony, we should be safe there, says the worker drone. But you said your people don't like humans, protests the green-haired boy. Yes, but I like you. As a friend, of course. So you come with me and there's no arguing. I don't care what anyone says, Uzi states firmly. Hearing these words, Izuku blushes brightly, then smiles and says, "Thank you, Uzi, I really appreciate it." What the two didn't know was that N had followed them after realizing they weren't drones and was ready to be led to the worker drone colony. But what he didn't even know was that he was being followed by the lizard scrapper along with the arachnoid one and 4 others that the latter had called. The first one had a robust but clumsy appearance, was made of metal with light brown colors, had a single large glowing red eye, and in place of the left hand there was a gigantic and sharp chainsaw. The second was a few centimeters taller than the spider-legged robot, had short clawed arms, and in place of an upper torso and head, it had an old-fashioned TV with a black screen that showed only 2 red eyes. The third one had a very bizarre appearance. It was made up of 2 tank tracks attached to a small torso that ended with a large toothed head with a red eye inside. The fourth and last one had a slightly hunched appearance. There were many dangling threads attached to the torso and under the chin of the head, which was shaped like that of a frog with large red eyes. The lizard scrapper who was in front was observing the scene together with his group from a snow hill. The monster focuses its gaze on Uzi's electromagnetic rifle, observing it so closely that it almost seems fascinated by it. The robot with the TV head turns to the lizard and emits some strange and incomprehensible sound, and on its screen the red writing, "Let's go." The monster growls briefly and then signals to its companions, and the wreckers begin to descend the snowy hill in preparation for the impending slaughter they have in mind. Shortly after, Izuku and Uzi finally arrive at the latter's hideout and she opens the 3 large metal doors revealing some worker drones who were sitting at a table playing cards. Uzi, is that human? How is he still alive? Asks one of them, shocked to see the green-haired teenager. Yes, he's human, and no, we're not getting rid of him. So you can all bite me. The robot girl shouts as she quickly closes the bunker door, but just before it can close completely, she's blocked by N's clawed hand that appears out of nowhere. He uses his pointed tail to hit the door scanner, slowly but surely causing it to reopen, allowing the murder drone to enter and say, "Hey guys, thanks for letting me in, I love playing cards, oh wait. I'm here to kill you." In a second all the worker drones who were supposed to protect the others from outside panic when N enters the facility. "We're using the human as bait soon." One of them shouts at Uzi who growls and says, "We will not use him as a diversion." Suddenly the murder drone had decapitated one worker and was shooting the rest, turning one of its hands into a machine gun. But Izuku promptly grabs the shooting hand and forces it to the ground, causing all the fired bullets to fall to the ground. Uzi picks up his rifle, which had been reloaded in the meantime, and points it at the enemy, ready to pull the trigger, but at that moment his father, Condorman, a mustachioed drone wearing a winter jacket and snowboard goggles, enters the room. His eyes widen as he sees all that chaos and then he looks at his daughter and says, "Uzi, what have you done?" Before the purple-haired robot could respond, N breaks free from the hero's grip and steps between the 2 drones, saying, "I'm sorry, Izuku and Uzi, I really enjoyed my time with you, but I can't afford to hurt V. Uzi, you let a murder drone and a human in here?" Khan asks in panic. "No offense sir, but I'm not the problem," says the UA student. "It's not the time, Dad. I messed up and I'll fix things the same way," says the worker drone ready to shoot. But immediately after N pins Uzi to the wall with his tail and hits Izuku making him fall to the ground and then the poker table falls on him. The electromagnetic rifle lands at Khan's feet. The robot girl notices it and says, "Dad, aim and shoot, it will work, trust me." The worker drone leader trembles with fear, then briefly glances at his daughter and runs away without even looking back. Seeing this, Uzi seems psychologically devastated. "What, do you really want to leave your daughter here to die?" The UA student shouts as he moves the table from above him. Khan says nothing and in an act of cowardice closes the door behind him. The hero in training gets up throwing the table away, but immediately after the room turns red due to alarms and at the same time J and V make their entrance with the latter flying and hitting the human making him lose consciousness. "Wow N, am I dreaming or having a malfunction because you just did something useful," says the pigtailed murder drones. "I've been trying to get through those damn doors for months, good job N." Adds V. The robot boy blushes at the other murder drone's words and says in amazement, "You remembered my name. Now we just need to break down this last door and exterminate those worker drones, and we'd better hurry. I saw some scrap dealers not too far from here. As soon as we finish the job, we can have more branded pens," Jay says, pulling out a pen marked J.C. Jensen. At that moment, the male murder drone remembers Uzi and Izuku's words about what would happen to them when they were no longer useful to the agency. "Hey Jay, listen. I can't wait to keep killing these not so different from us worker drones, but, do you know what's going to happen to us after we're done?" The robot boy asks his leader, who looks at him confused and says, "What the fuck?" Meanwhile, Uzi regains consciousness and looks at Izuku who was unconscious on the ground. "Okay, first that apparently human worker drone told me they could help us fix the pod, which I know is against the rules, but it also made me wonder why the company made it a single-use missile. You know, I get the feeling the company doesn't really like robots that much, and I think we're robots. So maybe we could befriend them." N explains, visibly nervous. "I don't believe you. Did you just question the company? You just gave me a reason to eliminate you," says J before impaling N with his tail, injecting a virus, making him fall to the ground. "The worker drones are corrupt. That's why they sent us here, and honestly I hate to see you corrupt too," says the pigtailed murder drone before flying off to join V. Soon after, Izuku regains consciousness, gets up and quickly helps the purple-haired worker drone off the wall. "Oh, baby, I'm sorry, guys, I ruined the card game, caused awkward moments with the parents, and got you hit in the head," says the disassembling drone in pain. "Well, We pushed you to rebel against everything you knew, although to be honest, everything you knew was wrong, so we're even, says the UA student. For the record, that was the worst re-flag I've ever seen, says Uzi. How many have you seen? Asks the green-haired boy. Not many, I admit, replies the drone. Being a rebel is harder than I thought, but thanks for showing me the ropes, says N in his usual friendly tone. But, do you realize that you've done terrible things? Asks Izuku in a serious tone. Yes, I know, I was wrong, replies the murder drone. The same way you're going to fix things here, Uzi says, taking out the wrench her father had given her. Oh, I love doing anything, says N. Well then get ready to save lives, says the UA student. Shortly after, we can see V and J in front of the worker drones. Khan and his friends were as far away as possible even though their job was to protect others. Aren't you supposed to be defending us, like? Asked one of the emerald green-eyed drones who was dressed like an American teenager with a backwards hat. His name was Thad. Immediately after V jumps on him, knocking him to the ground. Before she could kill him, the female murder drone hears Izuku's voice shouting, "Stop. Let him go. Are you, a human?" Jay says confused, "Hey Jay. You're often not very nice to me and I wish you'd stop," says N, who punches Uzi and Izuku at the same time. "How the hell are you alive, human? This planet's atmosphere is toxic to carbon-based life forms," the murder drone leader asks the green-haired boy. "It has no effect on me since I'm from another universe, but that doesn't matter. As a human, I order you to stop hurting the worker drones," says the hero in training. "No, you're not a J.C. Jensen executive, so I don't take orders from you," says the gray-haired robot, activating her clawed fingers. Uzi turns to N and asks, "Which one you, Jay please?" the murder drone states timidly. "Too late, she's mine, Izuku you," the purple-haired robot girl tries to say before being interrupted by a terrifying mechanical roar from behind them. The three turn towards the source of the noise and see the lizard Scrapper and his group standing in the doorway of the broken door of the Great Hall in a threatening manner. "You take care of the junkyards," Uzi says, clutching the electromagnetic rifle, so the hero turns toward the mechanical monsters and gets into a fighting stance. As Uzi and N ran towards their opponents, the lizard robot let out a short roar and the TV-headed robot ran towards the human and attempted to punch him. But the UA student runs towards the little enemy and slams him straight into the screen, breaking it and killing him instantly. The Scrapper with the frog head opens his mouth wide and a long tentacle that ends in a pincer grabs the human. At the same time, the robot with the chainsaw hand and the one with the tracks run towards Izuku, who however uses 10% OFA to grab the frog head's tongue and throw it against the chainsaw hand, making them both fall to the ground. The mechanical monster with tracks reaches the human and tries to bite him, but he grabs its jaws and holds them open. The enemy then tries to crush the young hero with the tracks, but he activates the black whip quirk and various black tentacles sprout from his arms which get stuck between the tentacles of the tracks, blocking them. Meanwhile, Chainsaw Hand gets up, positions himself behind Izuku and starts running towards him, pointing the lethal limb at him. But he notices it, and as soon as the Scrapper is a few centimeters away, he activates 10% of One for All on his legs and emits an inhuman leap. At the same time he deactivates Black Whip and the robot with the tracks runs towards his colleague's chainsaw which sticks straight in his eye, killing him. Despite this, the tracks continue to move forward and then crash into a wall, also destroying the Chainsaw Hand. The hero in training activates Float to slow his fall, and at the same time the frog robot shoots out its long tongue again, but this time it is caught. "Scusa Suyu," Izuku thinks to himself and then pulls out his tongue with all his strength, tearing out many internal pieces and killing the robot frog. As soon as he lands, the skull-shaped wrecker with spider legs growls and quickly runs towards the UA student who had almost fallen but is stopped by N, who in the meantime had knocked out V, who shoots him, breaking his skull and making him fall to the ground. "Thanks N," the green-haired boy shouts to his new robot friend, but at that moment the reptilian robot grabs his neck with one hand while the other begins to glow. In a second the monster punches him in the face before grabbing him by the back and throwing him to the ground. The UA student spits out a few drops of blood and tries to get up, but the wrecker kicks him in the stomach, making him moan in pain. N flies towards the monster and pierces its back with its pointed tail, but it does not penetrate the hard metal it was made of. The mechanical monster grabs the gray-haired drone and slams him to the ground, but before he could harm him, the hero punches him hard in the face using 20% of his quirk. The wrecker flies through the air and then falls heavily to the ground. He gets up and runs towards the human, trying again to attack. But Izuku grabs him by the throat and floats towards one of the walls, causing him to repeatedly crash into the hard concrete. Eventually the two land with the lizard robot apparently dead, with some cracks on its body and small sparks coming out of some parts where there were holes. "Well, I think that was the last one," says the human, taking a deep breath, but then notices that not too far away is Uzi, who has pinned Jay to the ground and is pointing the electromagnetic rifle right at her face. The green-haired boy can see the face of the murder drone's leader and sees that she was terrified. Her eyes were begging for mercy. Small digital tears were forming in her face. Screen is starting to glitch due to the damage she took during the fight. Even the worker drone sees this and her look of triumph slowly changes to one of pity. "Uzi, put down the gun. Don't become like her," says Izuku, putting a hand on his friend's shoulder, who after a few seconds says as if, "Why you're sparing me, why?" "Because that's not how we heroes act. We stop enemies but we don't kill them. I'm a hero, not a murderer. Scrappers don't count because they don't have feelings," explains the green-haired human while holding out the disassembler drone's hand. "Yeah, that's what he said, but I still don't like you," comments the purple-haired robot. Jay blushes slightly and looks at the human's hand for a few seconds before grabbing it and getting up. Thanks. "I guess, and I give up." "Wow, great guys, we did a masterful job," says N as he approaches his friends carrying a tied-up V who didn't look happy at all. But suddenly the lizard robot lights up again, gets up and snatches Uzi's electromagnetic rifle from his hands and then quickly runs away. "Oh come on. I finally figured out how to work it." Once the junker leaves the room and disappears from sight, all the worker drones come out of their hiding places and start clapping. "Wow, Uzi, and you two were great," says Thad. "Huh, oh, I'm N, the first rebel disassembler drone," says N friendly. "Hello, I'm Izuku," says the UA student shyly. One of the drones approached the green-haired boy in a threatening manner. He had red eyes, long dark hair, and was wearing a short red dress with dark yellow parts. She was Doll, a worker drone who had the peculiarity of speaking only in Russian. "Ignore the solver symbol. Listen, human, do you have any idea what your kind did to my parents? Ascolta bene umano, hai la minima idea di quello che la tua specie abbia fatto ai miei genitori." Cheat in russo dal con tono aggressivo. "You're welcome. Sorry, but I don't speak your language," says Izuku, confused, making the robot huff and walk away annoyed. At one point Khan appears and remains silent with a guilty expression on his face. Screen. Uzi's dad tries to say something but she cuts him off, saying, "Don't even try, Dad. I brought the murder drones here by mistake, but you left me and Izuku to die on purpose, so I'll save you the trouble because I'm banning myself. Come on guys, all of them can bite me." So the group heads towards the exit of the colony, with Jay looking down and N briefly turning to the worker drones saying, "Hi. It was nice to meet you, Mr. Uzi." Time jump. We can now see Uzi sitting on a broken car while N was observing the scene from the entrance of the House of Bodies. "I would join you if the sun didn't kill me. I'm sure you're going through some major character development," says the murder drone, but Jay's voiceover says, "Silence N. I can't wait to kill the humans. I hope they're having fun on Earth, because we're coming for them," says the worker drone with a crazed smile, as if her sanity had shattered at that very moment. But she hears a small fake cough behind her, turns around and sees the UA student looking at her with a slightly stern look. "Okay, only the guilty ones," says the purple-haired robot, but her human friend's face doesn't change. "And we'll make them pay without killing them. Better?" asks the robot girl. "It's definitely better," Izuku says with a cute smile. Uzi blushes briefly and then smiles at his human. He was still hurt by his father's actions, but he was sure that with Izuku it would be easier to deal with the pain. Meanwhile, in the colony of working drones, we can see worker drones putting the bodies of the scrap dealers into large gray trolleys for possible reuse. At one point, one of the robots places the lifeless body of the skull robot with spider legs on top of a pile of pieces inside one of the carts. The camera zooms in on one of the skull wrecker's eyes for a few seconds until it suddenly lights up with a blinding red light. We can see Izuku walking through the snow towards the base of the murder drones who had now become, almost all, his and Uzi's allies. The green-haired boy looked up to observe the imposing and disturbing structure in front of him. I still have to completely get used to this situation. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to find anything useful during this expedition. Let's hope Uzi was luckier inside the pod, thought the UA student as he entered the House of Corpses. Just before he could reach the pod, Izuku is stopped by En, who falls from the ceiling a few centimeters away from him. "Wow, En, are you okay?" asks the worried human. "I'm fine. I'm fine. Just a weird vision, dream, flashback of some kind of weird mansion," says the murder drone as he gets up and brushes the snow off himself. "Ooh, okay, Uzi is in there?" asks the hero in training. "Oh yeah, he's in the pod right now with J and V," states the robot. So the two enter the pod, where we can see J with his back leaning against one of the walls, V who was chained to a chair busy making soap bubbles, and Uzi who was holding a sort of small medal in the shape of a skull with angel wings. "Hey guys, I'm back, what's up?" asks the green-haired boy. "I found this weird thing, I'm not sure what it is," says the worker drone. "I've never seen her. Should we do an autopsy to find out?" asks V in a disturbing way. "Cut it out, V," J commands sternly. "Hey, since you and N are traitors, that makes me the leader of the team, so I do what I want," protests the disassembler drone with a snort. Uzi proceeds to put the symbol in N's hat while saying, "Did you know this was a pilot hat?" "I'm a pilot," says the murder drone excitedly, and then immediately realizes something. "That means I crashed here and ruined everything." "Well, that would explain a lot," comments the robot with the braids harshly. "Hey, maybe it didn't go that way. Maybe it was a short circuit and it wasn't your fault," Izuku suggests, trying to cheer up his friend. Jay sighs and says softly, "That would make sense too. Since she was spared, she's been feeling strange. She's also started questioning the factory's intentions, and honestly, she doesn't really know why she's doing it, much less why she's not massacring the purple-haired drone and, in particular, the superpowered human." "Well, speaking of piloting, are we sure this whole thing about coming to Earth and killing humans is ethical?" asks the murder drone. "It's absolutely unethical. In fact, we won't kill anyone," says the UA student firmly, crossing his arms. "The agency sent you here in a damaged pod, and messed up your memories. Covering their tracks means the humans have stopped negotiating. Not that they ever tried to negotiate with my mother," the worker drone explains bitterly as she breaks her wrench. Okay, hold on a second. Maybe I'm starting to doubt them, but I'm not letting you kill my bosses," Jay says, stepping in front of the other girl. "Uzi, I understand that you feel extremely hurt by the agency's actions, but killing them will only make us like them. That's not how a hero acts," Izuku says, placing his hand on his friend's shoulder. "Well, maybe you refused to negotiate. They programmed us to solve a problem. How can we hope that the story about your entire species being conveniently innocent is true?" asks the chained murder drone. "Hey, calm down, V, we can work this out peacefully," says N, trying to calm his crush down. "Well, for what it's worth, I was receiving orders through some sort of transmitter in my head, but since you spared me, it kind of automatically deactivated itself and I didn't even hear a real human voice, more like an artificial voice," explains Jay. Stop complicating my revenge plan," says the worker drone as she rests her back on the UA student's chest, who is blushing brightly, and unbeknownst to her she is blushing slightly too. The UA student tries to put his hand on the robot girl's shoulder again, but she pushes it away but still remains leaning on him. Meanwhile, we can now see a kind of large operating room, half of which was shrouded in darkness. At one point, the lizard scrapper enters the room with the rifle he stole from Uzi in his hand and bows before the shadowy area. After a few seconds, a long, clawed arm emerges from the darkness and offers its hand to the other robot. The reptilian scrapper stands and carefully hands the electromagnetic rifle to the creepy limb that grabs it before retreating into the shadows. The being moves slightly closer to the light, enough for its humanoid body, its multitude of arms, and its many glowing red eyes to be visible. The robot analyzes the firearm in its hands for a few seconds, then looks at its follower and points to an operating table in the center of the room. The robot nods and proceeds to walk towards the table and sit on it. The creature in the shadows then proceeds to walk towards its servo while using one of its limbs it begins to dismantle the electromagnetic rifle. Meanwhile outside the House of Corpses. Returning to our protagonists now N, J. Izuku and Uzi are outside the House of Corpses. Are you okay Uzi? N asks the girl who says in a crazy tone, yes I'm fine, better than fine. I am God. Izuku and J. But then the worker drone notices that Thad is next to her, holding one of his prototypes for the electromagnetic rifle. Oh, hey thanks Thad, says an embarrassed Uzi as she takes the rifle from her more or less friend who replies, of course uncles, any Ms. Izu, girl who wanted to kill me. Uzi remains indifferent, N gives both thumbs up smiling, Izuku raises his arm slightly in greeting and J rolls her eyes boredly. I mean, almost all of you saved my life. I don't even think the colony takes this exile thing seriously, I'm just kind of confused with. The robot boy continues, only to be interrupted by Uzi who says, the fact that I'm too wild to re-enter society anymore, I'm never coming back. I was going to say with all the disappearances that are happening and the fact that maybe there's a scrap dealer infiltrating the colony, Thad says. Wait, what? Asks the green-haired boy in shock. Yeah. People have been disappearing inside the colony for a while now, and what's more, when I was sneaking up on the rifle, I swear I saw something black with spider legs run down a corridor and enter a ventilation duct. Everyone looks at each other and after a few seconds of silence the purple-haired girl says, okay, maybe I can come back for a little while. Shortly after, we now see the group consisting of N, J, Thad, Izuku and Uzi landing in front of the entrance door of the worker drone colony. The male worker drone knocks on the door which opens slightly revealing a guard who says, oh welcome back Thad, wait you're not grounded, referring to the purple-haired drone at the end. What, I'm banned? Does my father really think I'm just being grounded? The girl growls. Then the guard sets his gaze on the hero in training and the two murder drones saying suspiciously, the human and the genocide drones. Hi, I swear I don't want to hurt anyone, in fact we're here to help. Explains the UA student. Meanwhile, J and N look at each other, with the former giving the latter a little push, who steps forward in front of the crack in the door and then hands the worker drone a sheet of paper. The guard takes the paper and looks at it. It was a not exactly beautiful drawing with a caption on it that said, we're sorry. The security guard looks at the group for a few moments, then smiles and says, okay, just don't do it again, before pressing the button that opens the door completely. I don't believe it actually worked. Comments J. You know, drawings are a great method of communication, replies N happily. So the group enters the colony of worker drones but at that moment it was more like the belly of the beast. The group of drones plus humans stealthily roam around the worker drone colony until they stumble upon what appears to be a crime scene with several robots investigating. Hey, where's Khan? You know, this doesn't look exactly ideal, one of the drones asks a female drone kneeling in front of an oil slick. I think he's at a meeting with the teachers right now. You know, it seems like his daughter is more important than putting a door in this corridor, the robot woman replies dryly. Hearing this Uzi lowers his head with a rather sad expression, an expression that is noticed by Izuku who asks in a low voice, are you okay? Stop asking, let's go. She retorts to the purple-haired girl before walking past the investigation group who hadn't noticed them yet, followed by the rest of the group. Shortly after, the group arrives in the room where the battle with the murder drones and the scrappers took place, which is now completely dark, forcing the group to use flashlights. There were also large stains of oil on the floor and dripping onto the ceiling. From what you know, scrap dealers do this? Asks Thad. No, this is pretty damn weird, comments J. Yeah but also quite threatening, adds N in a lighthearted tone. Meanwhile Izuku notices a large square structure with a writing with a symbol, hey what's this? He asks attracting the attention of his companions. Hey that's Miss Murder Plans, weird eye symbol, says the pigtailed murder drone earning an angry look from the worker drone. What? Asks the green-haired boy, even before you came, one of his eyes took the shape of that symbol and a mirror broke, in short, a strange eye, explains J. Stop calling it that. Absolute Solver reboot, has anything to do with how your head grew back when I blew it up? Uzi asks N who says awkwardly, I honestly avoid trying to figure out how it works. Well, new material can't just pop up out of nowhere. There's something weird about it, says the UA student. If the wound is already too serious, This solver could be a sort of automatic system for immediate repair, suggests the worker drone. The conversation is interrupted by the sound of small footsteps approaching the group. Everyone turns in the direction of the sound, ready to see something terrifying emerge from the darkness. But to their surprise, the one to step out of the shadows is the spider-legged wrecker, who starts growling like a rabid dog and raises his upper spider legs in defiance. Izuku activates his quirk ready to strike the iron monster, but is stopped by Jay, who, along with the rest of the group, seems to have seen something terrifying behind the small enemy. The hero in training takes a closer look and his eyes widen in horror when he notices a sort of human hand attached to a long arm that reaches up to a high area of the structure. Even the robot spider notices what was behind him and moves away in fear, unconsciously approaching those he had wanted to kill just moments ago. The hand crawls for a few moments on the floor and then makes a superhuman leap and grabs Thad's leg. Suddenly a sort of large white mechanical claw also appears and grabs the scrap dealer by the head. N activates his hand cannon and fires a rocket at the base of the limb. The explosion causes a small explosion that allows us to see what appears to be a gigantic creature with a body similar to that of a centipede. Izuku realizes what is about to happen, but before he can do anything, both the robot boy and the arachnoid monster are quickly dragged to the upper floor of the room. But with lightning speed, N throws a ninja star at the limb, which cuts it clean off, freeing Thad while the scrapper is dragged away. "I want a ninja star too," says the worker drone in a slightly childish tone. "And nice reflexes, I must admit," comments Jay. But another claw appears from the darkness and strikes the group before grabbing Thad and dragging him back. The group follows the screams to a long corridor where the aforementioned robot boy was present, who seemed fine but at that moment looked like a hologram. "Hey guys, it's me, Thad. Don't worry, I'm fine, come here, I found something," says Thad's hologram in a strange and damn suspicious tone. The four look at each other for a few moments before looking at the hologram and preparing for battle. "Hey guys, wait, is it really me? Wait, is that a ninja star?" asks the entity as it starts glitching, and at the same time N throws one of the ninja stars he had in the air. Izuku jumps in the air and kicks the small weapon in the air until it hits something in the air, and immediately after the real Thad falls to the ground. The hologram disappears and in its place appears a sort of camera with a glowing yellow eye. "Wow, you guys saved me again. You're totally invited to my party next week, popular kids only," says the worker drone before running away from the creature. Izuku, N and Uzi look at each other and smile excitedly at the invitation while Jay looks at them and rolls her eyes boredly. "Whatever, we were busy creating our new host, so it doesn't matter." "Unpleasant," says the creature as it steps out of the shadows, revealing its monstrous form. It was a kind of large iron earthworm with various tentacles on its body along with real camera limbs and claws, one of which held the skull scrapper captive with spider legs. The strangest thing was that its head was that of Jay and its mouth was full of small, sharp teeth. "What the hell are you? And why the hell do you have my head?" asks the pigtailed disassembler drone as it points its hand rifle at the monster. "What program are you, right? The absolute solver?" asks Izuku as he activates OFA. "More than anything, you are my little toys," says the creature as it activates one of its cameras, which creates a hologram of Uzi's mother holding a baby version of her. "It hurts our feelings that you don't remember us, even though I can excuse the little green humans since we never met," says the hologram and then disappears. Jay, "What's with my mother's hologram?" asks the green-haired robot girl, but notices that they've disappeared, leaving her and Izuku alone to face the monster. "Easier to assimilate than to explain," says the solver as he surrounds the duo with his tentacles. "It's not going to happen." The UA student shouts at the entity, who says, amused laughter, "Right, in that case we'll have to do something shocking," before taunting Uzi Khan's father and tearing him in two, splashing his oil all over the room, traumatizing the girl. The hero in training promptly lays his hands on the enemy and activates the black whip tentacles that attack and envelop him. Soon after, a rocket launches from behind the drone and the human and hits the creature, causing it to moan in pain. Suddenly Jay and N reappear next to the duo, with the latter saying, "Uzi, shoot or give it to me. Are you okay?" Meanwhile, the green-haired boy is attacked by a pair of claws, including the one that was holding the scrap dealer, who seemed to be having the worst time of his life. The human dodges an attack from a claw and hits it with 20% one for all, breaking it clean. Meanwhile, Uzi is still terrified by what she saw and responds to N's question by saying, "No, I'm not okay." Immediately after his N and J smile in a disturbing way. In fact, they reveal themselves to be projections of the creature, which then hits the robot girl with a tentacle, making her drop the electromagnetic rifle, and then hits it with a claw, damaging the core, which starts to shine dangerously. Then a mechanical claw grabs her head and pins her to the wall. "It's time to come into my mouth," says the monster as he brings his head closer to Uzi's, who begins to struggle in an attempt to free himself. Izuku tries to go and save his friend, but a tentacle grabs him by the leg and slams him to the ground, and a claw grabs his head and tries to crush it. But before anything terrible can happen, most of the limbs are cut off by the real J and N, with the latter saving the worker drone and the former saving the green-haired boy. Meanwhile, the core of the electromagnetic rifle was turning red and was clearly on the verge of exploding. Seeing this, the two murder drones grab their partners and fly away, activating their wings. The monster tries to follow them but is distracted by the rifle, which was now about to explode. The scrapper, who was still trapped in the grip of the claw, tries to free himself desperately, now realizing that he was about to explode. The UA student notices the scene and after a few moments of reflection decides to fire a black whip tentacle that grabs the small robot monster and rips it from the claw's grip just seconds before the monster explodes due to the gun's core. The explosion is large enough to knock the group into the air. After a few seconds that felt like hours, Izuku opens his eyes again, looks around and sees J on his left, the spider-legged robot on his right, and N and Uzi half a meter away from him. The entire room was now completely destroyed, but suddenly from a pile of rubble comes out a kind of small robot with 3 spider-like legs and a big yellow eye. Stealthily get caught off guard," says the little monster as he tries to run away but is stopped by N, who impales him with his pointed tail. Despite the blow, the little creature gets up and tries to move, but the scrapper promptly stabs it with one of his pointed legs. The two begin to repeatedly strike the creature until it vanishes in a small flash of light, leaving only a small black ball that flies away. In the distance you can hear the sound of footsteps and a voice in the distance. N looks at Uzi, who was looking at the ground with wide eyes while the UA student stood next to her. The disassembly drone tries to grab her shoulder, but she flinches and moves away, asking the two other robots, What are you?" The robot boy seems hurt by the question but is brought back to reality by J, who waves him away. A few seconds later, a large group of worker drones enter the room. Among them is Khan, who sees nothing but his daughter sitting on the floor with a human and a scrapper. The purple-haired girl stands up and turns to her father before slowly walking towards him. "Uzi, what are you?" the worker drone tries to say but is interrupted by his leaf hugging him as if his life depended on it. Khan then looks at the green-haired boy and the small iron monster with spider-like legs, who promptly takes a few steps away until he hides in the darkness and then in an air vent. "What have you done to my daughter?" Khan asks the hero in training in a stern tone, but Uzi stops him, saying, "It's not his fault. He didn't send the murder drones, he didn't create the toymaker or the scrapyard, he didn't cause the massacre, he makes me feel truly wanted. That's why I want him to stay here." "What?" asks the shocked leader of the worker drones. "Uzi, no need, I can go back to my pod," says the UA student. "No, you could die out there with or without the quirks, or whatever the hell your powers are called. So please stay with me," Uzi begs, looking at the green-haired boy with a small tear rolling down her eye. "Okay, I'll stay," says Izuku as several worker drones pass him by and explore the room where that violent battle took place. Meanwhile, we can see a drone girl with blonde hair who was wearing a school uniform and had a yellow bow that tied her hair and made it look like she had cat ears. She was Uzi Lizzie's classmate. She was looking at her phone while sitting on her bed in her room when suddenly her attention was caught by the sound of something coming towards her through a grate on the wall next to her bed. Suddenly the skull scraper with spider legs comes out of the grate and breaks it. He looks around until he sees the girl and growls, raising his legs in the air in a threatening manner. "OMG, you are adorable," says Lizzie as she runs towards the little iron monster and starts petting his head like he was a puppy, much to his confusion. Meanwhile, somewhere in the scrapper's base, we can see the lizard robot that was still sitting on the operating table with its mouth wide open. Inside there were a pair of mechanical arms that appeared to be inserting something into the monster's jaws. After a few seconds the limbs withdraw from the mouth and return to the darkness, the toymaker emits a monstrous, mechanical sound and his follower gets up from the table. The lizard scrapper looks at himself in a mirror attached to the wall, opens his jaws wide and from the bottom of them begins to come a bright red light like blood. It had been a while since Izuku had moved to the worker drone colony. He and Uzi hadn't heard from J, N, or V. The UA student, despite some small difficulties, was settling in well in the colony, just like its original inhabitants. At this moment we can see Uzi lying on her bed with her face screen showing the phrase, sleep mode remorse active, for a few seconds before waking up and looking at the ceiling where there was a drawing of N hanging of her, the human and the murder drone with smiles and a caption that said, "Thank you both for being my friends." The purple-haired girl sighs bitterly knowing she's messed up. Shortly after, we can now see the worker drone closing her school locker and two teenage drones pass by her. One of them had blue hair and eyes and was called Rebecca. "I'm already meeting Brad in an hour, can you imagine going to prom alone?" Rebecca asks her friend Trevor, who responds by saying, "It would already be like, I didn't deserve happiness or something like that." Uzi overhears the conversation and looks down realizing she's probably going to the dance alone. If you want, can I come with you to the prom?" A shaky voice asks from behind the worker drone, making her whirl around and meet Izuku's gaze. "What?" asks the purple-haired girl. I know I don't go to your school B but technically I'm a teenager like you and I don't think your dad would mind, says the hero in training, more embarrassed than ever before. Well I suppose you can, but don't get any weird ideas," Uzi states while blushing slightly. The two walked for a while until they stopped in front of a wall full of posters of worker drones that were disappearing into thin air. "Do you think the solver is back?" asks the green-haired boy. Maybe there's someone else behind all this time, says the girl looking next to her. The camera pans out to reveal that the spider-legged junk dealer was standing next to the two and was also looking at the wall. The little iron creature looks at the two teenagers and notices that they were looking at him suspiciously and takes a few steps away from them. "Hey, don't you dare blame my new pet Pointy. He's been with me the whole time and he wouldn't do anything bad to anyone," says Lizzie appearing out of nowhere and picking up the little skull-headed monster. "You realize that's a junkyard, you know. The monsters who still want to slaughter us?" Uzi asks the other girl. The blonde drone starts petting the robot saying, "Well he's cute so he's automatically forgiven," before walking away. Bite me," the purple-haired girl moans in annoyance and then leaves followed by the human. A few hours later, we can see Khan inserting the papers that were on the ceiling of Uzi's room and putting them in a cabinet with the words, "Nori's Weird and Wacky Things," written on them. As soon as the adult worker drone turns the corner he sees his daughter walking towards him angrily and says, "Daddy, stay out of my room." The personal space for very alarming defense mechanisms is not covered by non-voluntary family support structure, Khan retorts while reading from a manual. Uzi rolls his eyes and snatches the manual from his father's hands, saying, "Sorry I was vulnerable for 2 seconds. You were never there for me, so if you want to help me right now, stay away." The girl's father remains silent and she sighs and shouts, "Izuku." The aforementioned green-haired boy sticks his head out of a door and asks, "Yes. What do you need?" "Come on, we need to talk to N and J," says the purple-haired girl as she is about to leave but notices 2 human skeletons wearing elegant clothes. "Okay, what the hell are these?" asks the worker pointing to her corpses. "These are prom dresses. You and your human friend are forbidden from seeing those murder drones, bad influences," explains Khan. And immediately after another door opens revealing Lizzie, the scrapper Pointy and doll. "But I talked to your teacher about bringing some of your classmates with you, and their pets," says the leader of the worker drones. "Hey freak and human, get ready to become popular," the blonde says snidely while the other says in Russian, "Subso tibi, sito nine hotelos by pomoga tibi, Selavek, I inform you that I will not like to help you human." The little scrapper raises his paws revealing that they had pink bows attached. "And I'll be your chaperone," Khan says excitedly while wearing a small black bow tie. Uzi growls at the situation and then says, "Oh bite me, I honestly don't know how I should feel right now," Izuku thinks to himself. Meanwhile, we can see N looking at 3 skeletons in elegant clothes. "I want to be elegant, is that why you made us bring these skeletons here?" asks the robot boy. "Yes, we have to go there and look incredible." The human and the purple loser will let us in because they have no friends, and after we massacre everyone in that damn colony we will cut their heads off. Explains V, who was as usual chained to the chair. For the last time V. We won't kill anyone. Not anymore, and above all we won't kill those two, says J irritably. We can't interact with the workers anymore. We're too dangerous, the murder drone says sadly as it looks down at the ground. Look, I'm not good at this stuff, but I'm sure the worker drone was just scared of that situation with the solver. We'll go there and sort things out with her and with Izuku. J says, her cheeks blushing slightly. Maybe, but we're not taking you with us V. There's a weird snake monster with J's head out there. Maybe we grew up in a weird spooky mansion. Aren't you worried about not knowing what the hell we are? N asks his crush, who turns her chair around so the other two disassembler drones don't see that she has a scared expression with wide eyes. Listen, if you free me now I promise I'll only kill what we need to survive, the murder drone girl suggests, turning to look at her two classmates who are looking at the key sitting on a nightstand. Meanwhile, not too far from the colony, we can see the scrap lizard walking in the snow. His eyes were redder than normal and his mouth was also red and was emanating light. Behind him there were also other mechanical monsters. The first one had a bizarre and deformed appearance. He was the tallest of the group. He had a long torso with a hump on his back. His arms were rather small, his hands were sharp pincers, and his face was that of a porcelain doll. The second had a round body, and in place of hands it had iron chains that ended with small wrecking balls. The third had a slimmer build with some tubes attached to its back. Its fingers were long, sharp claws, and its head was cube-shaped. The fourth had a more humanoid appearance with a single large glowing eye on its head, but the most noticeable thing was that on its stomach there was a burning furnace with a trapdoor that could be opened. The fifth and last one had a bizarre and almost arachnoid appearance, and its red eyes were long and with a small white pupil. The lizard scrapper walks towards the worker drone colony with a determined expression as he was ready for the next battle with the hero in training. Returning to the base of the working drones. Now we can see Izuku, Uzi, Lizzie, Pointy and Doll enter the latter's house, which didn't exactly look good. Do you ever clean your house? The blonde drone asks her friend, who says, Polazil prostainu, oni spat, I put a sheet. They're sleeping, pointing to two figures sitting on a table covered by a sheet. Reminder, learn Russian to understand what he says. The UA student thinks to himself but then realizes that he is about to squash a small robot cockroach. So he stops and the bug retreats into the shadows, but it seems there were many more around. Even Uzi and the scrapper notice this and all three start to have a bad feeling. Hey, thanks so much for inviting us, but now that my dad thinks we're here we can, says the robot girl as he and the human are about to leave, but as soon as they turn around they see that Doll has appeared in front of the entrance, blocking them there. The two notice that next to the creepy drone was a trash can filled with posters of recently missing drones. Vana komnata nahoditsa v corridor sleva, the bathroom is at the end of the corridor on the left, Doll says with a smile that would have been an understatement to say terrifying. Izuku and Uzi step back slightly, groaning in unison, intimidated by the situation that was developing. Meanwhile in the pod, J and N stopped looking at V's chain slave and went back to looking at her. V, listen, something's going on here and I know you remember, even if it's just a piece of our past, but we can fix things together. The murder drone's boy tries to say but is interrupted when his and J's heads are cleanly severed by a sharp tail. It turns out that the disassembler drone had already freed itself some time ago. In fact, it gets up and says to the bodies of its companions on the ground, saying, I'm doing this for your own good, even if you'll probably hate me for it. So the robot girl takes a red dress from one of the skeletons and flies out of the pod and heads to the prom. We can now see Uzi in the bathroom of Doll's house as she was now wearing a dark ball gown with a mid-length skirt. The robot girl looks at herself in the mirror for a few seconds when suddenly one of her eyes transforms into the strange symbol. Oh no, Satan robot. Not this mirror too, says the worker drone as she covers her strange eye, which returns to normal after a few seconds. Immediately after, Izuku comes out of a door wearing a dark tuxedo with a green bow tie to match his hair. The two teenagers look at each other and blush slightly. Wow. Uzi, why you look really good in that dress, says the green-haired boy embarrassed. Thanks, you too, replies the drone, looking at the ground embarrassed as well. But their awkwardness is interrupted by Lizzie's voice in the distance saying, don't worry, no one will miss you. You do your thing and then join me and Pointy at the dance. The human and the robot look at each other with wide eyes from what they hear, then notice traces of oil on the wall where the bathtub was located. The duo heads towards the tent with Uzi grabbing her and making to pull her away. Meanwhile in the pod, J and N's heads had finally grown back and they both groaned in pain as they stood up. Oh, no, my crush is about to do something terribly wrong, says the robot boy as the pigtailed drone growls and then angrily says, I swear if V does anything to him I will kill her. The murder drone runs towards the exit of the pod, but her friend stops her by pointing to the two skeletons who still had their clothes on and says, J and N elegant. Returning to the colony, Izuku and Uzi stare wide-eyed at what was inside the bathtub, dozens of completely broken mirrors immersed in oil. Before they could process it, they hear footsteps approaching their position and quickly begin stacking the various mirrors to reach an open grate in the ceiling. Fortunatamente I due riescono a uscire dalla grotta e subito dopo dal entra nel bono, nota la pila di specchi e dice con tono annoiato. As they say in Russia, oops, I should have foreseen that someone could escape from the vent by stacking mirrors on top of each other. Come dicono in Russia, whoops avrei dovuto prevedere che qualcuno potesse scappare dal condono di erazione impalando gli specchi uno sopra l'altro. Meanwhile, Izuku and Uzi have managed to get out of the colony and are now running through the snow towards the murder drone's pod. I could have taken care of her, says the UA student. Absolutely not. I have a bad feeling about that girl and we better go get, the purple-haired girl states before two figures crash in front of them. These two figures turned out to be J and N, who were dressed in elegant suits. N was wearing a dark tuxedo with a dark red tie. J instead wore a light blue dress with a rather short skirt, and for once her hair was loose, reaching down to her back. Izuku, Uzi, well, you look really good in those clothes, says the pigtailed murder drone pointing at the clothes of the human and the worker drone. Thanks, you too, replies the hero in training, blushing. Anyway, V is free and is probably already inside slaughtering everyone in the colony, although I don't think you want our help, says N before turning and starting to leave. No, wait, we could get help from you, says Uzi, at a loss for words. What Uzi is trying to say is that she's sorry for what happened a while ago, and now we need your help, Izuku says, making J and N's faces light up, especially the former. The beautiful moment is however interrupted by an ominous noise. Everyone turns towards the source of the noise and sees the group of wreckers led by Delta walking towards them. We'd better hurry up, comments the worker drone, and her companions nod and start running towards the entrance of the colony. Meanwhile at the student ball, now we can see a large ballroom where many teenage worker drones were happily dancing. Also present was the junkyard worker Pointy, who was hopping around trying to dance, the teacher from Uzi's school who was bored drinking alcohol, and Khan who was nervously looking around the room for his daughter. Suddenly Lizzie comes on stage saying, "Okay nerds, I know it's early, but since the whole court mysteriously disappeared, the queen of the ball is this one." Suddenly V appears on stage, now wearing a long red dress. Everyone leaves immediately as the murder drone laughs evilly. Even Pointy stops dancing and exits the room through an air vent. "Calm down people, V is done killing and everything. We're now friends," Lizzie tells the audience as the killer robot slowly approaches, saying, "Yes, best friends, so manipulable." The disassembler drone chuckles to itself before pausing as it remembers something the blonde said. "Wait, prom queen?" asks the robot as she notices a worker drone holding a fake crown next to her. "Yeah, so forgive and forget, and if you don't my dad will lower your grades and you won't be able to sit with us, Rebecca." Lizzie threatens the crowd with Rebecca saying, okay, I forgive her." So the crowd starts cheering for V and she puts the crown on her head and walks towards a microphone, not noticing a red X in front of it. Khan has a bad feeling and tries to leave, but as soon as he picks up the doorknob it bubbles and the solver symbol appears in front of it, this time in red. "Not the doors," says the desperate leader of the worker drones, putting his hands on his head. Meanwhile outside the colony, we can see the scrapping crew as they hit the large doors of the colony in an attempt to break them down. At one point Delta roars, making his colleagues move away. The lizard robot stands about 2 meters from the door and his mouth begins to glow red. But before he could do anything, the solver symbol appears in front of the door and immediately after it opens. The wreckers seem confused by this, but not Delta, who smiles evilly, motions for his companions to follow him, and then enters the facility. Returning to the student ball. As soon as V steps on the red X, doll who was in the crowd smiles madly and activates the solver symbol on his hand, but before he can do anything, a part of the ceiling collapses, causing J, Izuku, Uzi, J and Pointy to fall. "Leave them alone, you," the purple-haired girl tries to say before noticing both doll and V and says, "Okay, now I'm confused." Suddenly, however, the Russian drone closes its fist and iron beams form on the stage that stab V's arms. Other signs of the solver appear, making Lizzie fly away and crushing the drone that was holding the crown. Another appears in front of the group of heroes and pushes them away towards a wall. "Hello, V, I'm sure you don't remember me. But I will never forget what you took from me. Ciao V, sono sicura che tu non ti ricordi di me. Ma io non mi dimenticherò mai di quello che mi hai portato via, dice freddament doll mentor si avvicina al palco." Flashback. We see a young doll hiding behind a door watching with wide eyes as the murder drone brutally kills one of her parents. Fine flashback. Odnako tai edo panames, however you understand it, states the crazy girl as the doors to the room finally swing open and a third iron pole appears, piercing the disassembler drone's torso, causing her to moan in pain. The worker drones attempt to leave the ballroom but are stopped when the scrap dealers emerge from the door, but they seem to ignore them. Il gruppo di mostri meccanici si dirigono verso dal ma non la attaccano anzi camminano insieme loro verso V, and now you will experience the sensation of devouring yourself. Dumps can be much more sensible than you think if you offer the right things. E adesso proverai tu stessa la sensazione di venire diverata. I rotamatori posano essere molto più ragionevoli di quanto si possa immaginare, quando offri la cose giuste, dice la drone russa facendo un senno ai rotamatori. V manages to free himself from one of the iron poles and activates his rifle hand and then starts shooting towards the enemy, managing to hit the iron monsters who retreat slightly. A bullet hits Back's head straight in the eye, who falls to the ground dead. New plan B. On talk on osen fa potter, be piano B. Kai fa da se fa per tre, dice la drone russa annoiata mentre I proedili che si avvicinano a lei si bloccano di colpo cadendo a terra. Doll then activates a solver symbol on a fan on the roof, which detaches and starts spinning, only to be thrown towards the murder drone by an unknown force. The assassin robot girl stops shooting and tries to cover herself by putting her hand in front of her face, but before the fan can reach her, N appears out of nowhere and strikes her with his blade hand. Then Uzi appears behind V and throws a ninja star at Doll, but he stops it with the solver symbol. However, the Russian is knocked to the ground by J, but before he could hit her further, Delta grabs her and throws her against a table. The large spider-like wrecker attempts to crush the tailed drone using his legs, but Izuku appears before him and punches him in the chest using 20% of one for all, killing him instantly. Really, Uzi? You want to side with the killer drones and humans? I'm not the only one who lost my parents to them, Davvero Uzi. Chi voi scirer con I murder drones egli umani. Non solo io ho perso I miei genitori a casa loro, afferma la drone lavoratrice mentre si rialza da terra con tono piano di odio. Bite me, Izuku has nothing to do with this. Whoever is behind this wants us to fight. I don't intend to keep doing this and I'm tired of dealing with this alone, Uzi says, looking at the UA student and smiling at him, and he smiles back. We move forward together or we don't move forward at all. We can fix this together, doll, says the green-haired boy. Hearing this, V, who was still standing still, was starting to question her past actions, and Khan, who was standing in the doorway, smiles slightly. Horozarek, no ni ne nuzna nika pomos, nice speech, but I don't need anyone's help, the Russian girl states coldly as one of her eyes becomes the symbol of the solver. Well, I gave you the chance to give up, says the hero in training as he activates his smoke screen quirk, and in moments, a huge cloud of smoke spreads across the room, confusing Doll and the wreckers. In the confusion, the green-haired boy starts hitting the scrappers, who start randomly launching attacks in an attempt to hit the human. The wrecking ball-handed robot manages to spot Izuku as he was punching the doll-faced one in the face and delivers a blow with its dangerous limbs. But the hero in training notices the blow and moves suddenly, and the wrecking ball smashes the head of the killer robot, who dies instantly. The green-haired boy runs towards the monster that was trying to attack him and punches him in the stomach using 10% of his power, sending him flying into the air and falling to the ground. Before he could get up again, he was killed by Pointy, who climbed onto his face and stabbed his eyes with 2 of his sharp paws before pulling them back and tearing them out. Meanwhile, Jay was flying around the room avoiding chairs and tables that the furnace-bellied scrapper was throwing at her. At a certain point, she transforms her hand into a grenade launcher and fires a bomb straight into the enemy's furnace, which after a few seconds explodes, killing the robot. As the smoke clears, Izuku notices Uzi on the ground with Doll a meter away who is about to throw a knife at her. The UA student promptly steps in front of his friend, and when the Russian throws the knife it sticks straight into the human's hand, who lets out a slight cry of pain. Before the Russian worker drone can do anything, Jay hits her, slamming her against the wall and impaling her with his claws, causing her to spit out some oil. She tries to activate the solver symbols, but V and N hold her hands back. Meanwhile, Delta watches as the UA student holds his injured hand as Uzi tries to help him and growls in anger. Some parts of the robot scrapper's body begin to glow red, it opens its jaws and an energy beam comes out of them. The human and the drone luckily manage to dodge the beam, with the latter shouting, "Hey! That's my electromagnetic rifle." Delta roars and charges the duo, but Pointy jumps on him and starts hitting his head with his paws, but he grabs him and slams him to the ground. Izuku takes advantage of this and runs towards the enemy, punching him with 25% of One for All, sending him flying into the air before crashing into a wall and falling to the ground. Despite the bad blow, Delta gets up and tries to hit the UA student with his tail, but he ducks, and as soon as the tail passes over his head he grabs it. Once he has caught the tail, the green-haired boy throws the scrap dealer again, who ends up against the last still intact table. Meanwhile, Doll activates a large solver symbol in front of her to free herself from the murder drone's grip and begins fighting again. Returning to Izuku, he runs towards the lizard robot, who was getting up and preparing to fire the energy beam, but is stopped when the hero starts hitting it with quick and lightning-fast punches using 5% OFA. After a few seconds, the UA student stops hitting him and punches him one last time straight in the face, knocking him to the ground, although this time he doesn't seem to get up. Then the green-haired boy turns around and sees that Uzi had kicked Doll hard, making her step back a few steps. However, the Russian worker drone imposes her hand, creating the solver symbol, but before she could do anything, V comes up from behind and shoots her in the head, killing her instantly. As soon as the robot girl falls to the ground, Uzi gets angry and says, "V, we needed that for the answers. She could have known something." "What? She's fine," the murder drone replies, crossing her arms in boredom. "I honestly don't think she's fine," says Izuku as Pondi walks over to Doll's corpse and pats her lightly with his paws. "Well, maybe we can get an answer or two," says Jay as he picks up Doll's bracelet from the floor, which had the key to her house attached to it. But no one noticed that Delta had silently risen from the ground and walked away. Shortly after, the group enters Doll's room, and turns on the lights fully, and everyone notices that the entire room is filled with dismembered and mutilated drone corpses covered in robotic cockroaches. Everyone is shocked, disgusted by the scene, except V, who says the sight of the carnage is cute. "Why would a worker drone eat others?" asks Uzi. Maybe she wasn't a worker at all," suggests the UA student. But everyone's attention is caught by N, who removes the cloth from the figures on the table, revealing 2 corpses. One had a winter hat on his head while the other had the same hair as Doll. "I guess these are his parents," says the murder drone as V chuckles and says, "They weren't even that good," but stops when she sees the hero in training glaring at her. "To be honest, you look a bit disgusting," says N. "I'm already not feeling very well," the girl states as she stops looking at the human. Meanwhile, Uzi takes a tag from the neck of one of the corpses that reads the name, Yiva. But suddenly Doll teleports to the bottom of the table, terrifying everyone. Jay tries to shoot, but the bullets are stopped by a solver symbol. Izuku shoots black whip tentacles, but the same thing happens. "Kak raz k Uzinu, just in time for dinner," says the Russian drone as it uses its power to remove the bullet from his head and fire it at Uzi. But incredibly, a purple solver symbol appears out of nowhere and blocks the bullet. Even Doll herself seems surprised by this and says, "Oh, prosti, kagda a naidu tu, sito isu, atb tos pomogu, oh. I'm sorry, When I find what I'm looking for, I'll help you too before teleporting away. The room falls silent for a few seconds until Uzi says, I hate this place. Meanwhile somewhere, we can see a calm expanse of snow for a few seconds, but suddenly a pod crashes to the ground and from it emerges a human girl wearing an astronaut suit with a bow on the back of her head. A kind of mechanical hawk also comes out with her and flies for a few seconds before landing on the girl's back. Come on, little one, we have work to do, the astronaut says to her robot, then sets off through the snow towards an unknown destination. The scene opens with a battered school bus driving down a snowy road towards a forest. Inside the vehicle are several teenage worker drones, including Pointy, who was sitting next to Lizzie Uzi, and Izuku, who was wearing a winter suit and had a headband wrapped around the hand that was pierced by the knife during the fight with Doll and the Scrappers. Are you sure we'll find answers here? The green-haired boy asks the drone, who replies, with a little hope, yes. The purple-haired girl takes collars with a skull symbol in the center from her pocket. Flashback. We can see Uzi and Izuku together with Khan, with the latter holding photos of him with his wife and other drones including Doll's parents. After the core collapsed, I didn't notice the collars, only your mother overcame her fear, says the colony leader as he opens his dead wife's locker, revealing a small wall full of strange, disturbing drawings. What is all this? Asks the UA student. I'm not entirely sure. Nori always said things like create gates for the sky demons to come. The singularity awakens. Look at all the beautiful things I can draw. Khan explains. Not to judge, but Uzi's mother didn't exactly seem mentally stable, thinks the hero in training to himself. After all, it seems I'm not the one you needed here, says the robot man with a resigned sigh. So the worker drone takes a collar and hands it to his daughter and then looks at the human saying, promise me you will protect my daughter. Izuku nods and says with determination, yes, I promise. Fine. Flashback. Finally the bus stops in front of a sign called Field 98.7. The doors open and all the students exit the vehicle and gather at the edge of the woods. Teacher, why this trip? One of the robot teenagers asks the teacher, who was sitting on a chair on top of the bus. It was Uzi and the humans' idea, ask them, the adult states nonchalantly. Bite me, I asked to go alone with my human friend. He's upset about the test results, says the annoyed worker drone. No, it's a bonus for you, no learning, replies the professor as he puts a summer hat on his head. Excuse me, but isn't there a risk that there are scrap dealers around here? You know, this place isn't far from the city, which is their main base, Rebecca asks while she's in her boyfriend's arms. Don't you know, scrap dealers are allergic to trees, says the professor. Everyone looks at Pointy, who shakes his head in denial, denying the adult drone's claims. So we're basically unsupervised, asks another teenage drone, but immediately after he says it, three winged figures crash land a few meters away from the group. The three figures are revealed to be N, V and J, who were wearing summer camp instructors' outfits. Sorry, I couldn't find any pictures of J in field clothes. Hello campers, let's hear from you. 1, 2, says the murder drone boy as he grabs a list and waits for the campers to continue counting. After a few seconds of silence, V activates his rifle arm and points it at one of the teenagers, but at the same time as he fires, J grabs the limb and lowers it, causing the bullet to end up in the snow. Frightened by the event, everyone shouts their numbers in unison, fearing that they will be killed by a bullet. Good job, J, Izuku says to the pigtailed drone, who blushes and says, thanks, you know I always do my job in the best way possible. Good, we're all here. We've prepared a lot of fun activities to distract ourselves, so no detective work, so off to the bunks. Says N, winking at Uzi and Izuku. Despite this, the worker drones are still not completely convinced, so the UA student comes forward saying, it's okay, I assure you they won't do anything bad. So Lizzie, Ponati and Thad also come forward, confirming that the murder drones were harmless, or at least most of them. Why yeah, they're like my friends too, so that's cool, Uzi says, blushing slightly. However, the teenage robots get scared and run away just because of her presence, which really demoralizes the purple-haired girl. Noticing this, Izuku places a hand on her shoulder and motions for her to go. She nods, and so the two head into the thick snowy forest. What they don't know however, is that the entire scene is being observed by three figures. They are three wolf-like wreckers who are camouflaged among the trees. As soon as they see that the human and the drone are moving away from the rest of the group, they lick their lips and start heading in their direction. Shortly after walking for a while, the duo reaches a run-down house in the middle of the woods. "Do you know exactly what we're looking for?" asks the hero in training. "I'm not sure, but I'm hoping for some answers about these strange abilities of mine," replies the drone. The two enter the house with Uzi levitating a flashlight with a solver symbol. "Well, it seems like you're doing pretty well with this new power," says the UA student, making the drone blush and say, thanks." There didn't seem to be anything special in the wooden cabin except for a calendar with some things written on it. Izuku took the calendar in his hand and looked at it, discovering that the writings were nothing more than phrases that told him to save the dogs on the planet in case of a catastrophe. "Well, since there are no dogs around here, I don't think they did a good job," the bored worker drone comments before noticing something with the flashlight. It seemed like there was a human hand disappearing behind a door. Izuku promptly activates one for all and runs towards the hand, but as soon as he reaches the room where the hand was hidden, there was no one there. The hero and the drone are extremely confused, but their confusion is interrupted by the sound of a scream. Izuku and Uzi run and look out a window only to discover that the scream was a scream of amusement. In fact, the teenage drones were sailing canoes together with the murder drones, even though the lake they were on was completely frozen. N led his group with playfulness. J gave precise and stern orders to be the fastest, while V simply let two workers carry the canoe, and sometimes they hit the rival ones. "At least they're having fun," comments the green-haired boy, while the robot girl observes the scene with a slight bitterness, saying, "They're already settling in really well, better than me." But suddenly his eye turns into the solver symbol and the window glass shatters into 1,000 pieces, scaring them both. Uzi quickly takes the backpack off his shoulders and opens it, revealing that inside were some oil-covered drone limbs, likely from Doll's house. Seeing this, Izuku's eyes widen in shock and look at his friend with a look of confusion and dismay. Meanwhile, we can see the professor still on top of the bus, sitting in his chair sleeping without caring about what's going on around him. But his sleep is interrupted when he hears the noise of something flying near him. He wakes up with a start and looks around. Once he'd made sure there was no one there, the adult said in a bored tone, "That's very funny, murder drones. Now go back to looking after the students while I think about topics for the next surprise test." So he goes back to sleep, but suddenly out of nowhere a harpoon attached to an iron rope appears and lodges itself in the worker drone's shoulder, making him cry out in pain. Immediately after, the harpoon retracts, taking the teacher with it, who screams in both pain and terror. After about 40 seconds, the professor's tortuous journey finally ends and he looks up to find himself face to face with his attacker. It was a scrapper with a round body, a single large red eye, 4 large spider-like legs, and a harpoon gun attached to its armless shoulder. The adult worker drone quickly pulls the harpoon out of his shoulder and tries to run away, but 2 more scrappers land in front of him. They had a slightly humanoid appearance with large wings attached to their backs. The professor then runs away in another apparently free direction, namely a part of the frozen lake, but after taking a few steps on the ice, something large inside the water hits the ice above the robot's feet, breaking it. This obviously causes the teacher to fall. Bubbles form in the water for a few seconds and then suddenly calm down again. The mechanical monsters gather around the crater in the ice, managing to glimpse a long figure swimming in the water. Suddenly Delta also appears and emits a mechanical sound towards the harpoon monster, and then looks at the 2 wreckers with its wings and emits a similar sound. The 2 winged robots shake their heads in agreement and take off towards the forest. "Uzi, why do you have those in your backpack?" Izuku asks in shock as he steps slightly away from his drone friend, who responds with a shaking voice, I don't know. It was stronger than me. It was some kind of instinct to put them in your backpack." Before the UA student could respond, V enters the house and says, "Tick, tack, hey, you said this camp would help us capture that doll so how about we explore more and spy through the windows less," and then points his claws at Uzi's throat. The hero in training promptly steps between his friend and the murder drones, saying, "We'll do it, but you should go back and watch over the campers, you know." Whatever you want, and anyway N and J will manage just fine without me, which is weird. Normally Jay would never do things like that. I think you two idiots changed her, says the disassembly drone and then leaves the room through a hole in the ceiling. The human sighs in relief, then picks up the backpack containing the limbs and says, "Listen, Uzi, we're not sure what we're dealing with when we talk about the solver or your powers, but you can't stoop to V's level," before throwing it away. The purple-haired girl sighs and says, "Yeah, I guess you're right," but at that moment the two notice a robot cockroach crawling through a crack in the floor. Uzi uses his powers to break through that section of the floor, revealing oil-covered drone corpses along with strange drawings similar to the ones in Nori's locker. "I think we found Doll's hideout," says the UA student as he picks up a drawing and stares at it intently, as does the worker drone. However, a peculiar dark gray robot cockroach was climbing onto his hand and emitting light green lights. The drone tries to crush him but he dodges and climbs onto the other hand and a sort of small chat comes out of his body in which he shows an angry face. The two teenagers look at each other in confusion as the mechanical insect sends a message saying, "Call the elevator." "Elevator? Which elevator?" Izuku asks, tilting his head in confusion. "Please put me on the proximity reader," the cockroach replies. "Where is it? What are you?" Uzi asks the bug, which responds with the message, "Invalid response." "The longer this goes on, the less I understand about this whole story," says the green-haired boy, and the drone nods in agreement. But what they don't know is that behind them there is Doll who watches them evilly, smiling for a few seconds and then disappears into thin air so as not to be seen. Shortly after, we can see the worker drones and the trio of murder drones still on the frozen lake playing with bows and arrows. Izuku and Uzi hide behind a tree with the latter attempting to communicate with J and V using the mechanical cockroach's chat. Luckily this is noticed by N, who sees the message: "You say, show it to J and don't let V notice." But unfortunately when he notices the duo, the murder drones happily and loudly says, "Oh hello guys." "Oh sorry," natural reflex of inclusiveness. At the sight of the boss's daughter, all the student drones get scared and one of them accidentally shoots an arrow which is blocked by a solver symbol. But immediately after, the arrow begins to mutate and in a few seconds it transforms into a sort of mass of rotting flesh with small eyes and tentacles that move clumsily on the ground. Izuku looks at the mass of flesh in terror and then looks at Uzi, who was equally terrified of what she had unintentionally done. The purple-haired girl takes a few steps back before quickly saying, "I live in the forest now," and running off into the depths of the woods. Uzi, wait, the UA student tries to say but is stopped when one of the wolf wreckers appears in front of him and growls at him. The other two robot wolves arrive in front of the group of worker drones and murder drones who try to retreat but are stopped when the two winged robots land behind them. The hero in training runs towards the campers but is stopped by a harpoon that crashes in front of him. The human turns and sees the scrapper with the harpoon gun who was standing on a rock at the end of the lake. One of the students, a terrified Darren, notices a free corner between the two mechanical dog monsters, takes his girlfriend Rebecca's hand and runs away with her. The couple takes a few steps on the frozen lake but suddenly the ice cracks beneath them because something was emerging, throwing the two drones away. But their escape is interrupted when a large wrecker that looks like a praying mantis lands in front of them. The two teenage robots scream in terror and immediately after the iron creature impales them both with its clawed paws. "Ah damn," the UA student says to himself as the scrap wolf jumps on him trying to bite him but he manages to dodge the attack. Meanwhile, another of the wolves runs towards the campers but Jay lands on top of him and impales him with his claws, killing him instantly. "Ah, I knew we had to kill that purple thing right now," V says boredly as she wrestles with one of the winged robot monsters. "We are not hurting Uzi." The green-haired human retorts as he slams the iron dog that was trying to kill him to the ground and dodges another spear. "We do our job and that thing will leave us alone," says the murder drones as it shoots at the two flying wreckers who dodge the bullets as they fly. "We don't know what you're talking about because you won't tell us," says N as he hits a wolf with his tail, sending it flying into a rock. Jay lands one of the flying scrappers and crushes his head with her foot and says to the other girl in an authoritative tone, "Yes, I'm tired of your silence, V. Tell us what you're afraid of." "Hey, I'm not scared," the murder drones replies as she parries the mantis robot's attack with her sword hands. "We're all scared, V. I'm scared because of what's happening to my friend. And I'm sure N and J are scared too. Seriously, what's your problem?" Izuku says in a serious tone as he rips the mechanical wolf in half and grabs a harpoon gun and sends it flying into the air before crashing to the ground. Hearing this, V looks at his two colleagues and notices that they were indeed looking at him with uncertain faces, especially N. The murder drone begins to reflect, not noticing that the mantis was about to hit it, but quickly N shoots it straight in the head with his gun hand, killing it instantly. The robot girl looks at the male murder drone and blushes slightly, not expecting such a cool move. Seeing that he is cornered, the only remaining scrapper, the second winged monster, roars and then flies away towards the forest. But no one noticed that the scrapper with the harpoon gun had gotten up and arrived behind Izuku without being noticed and was ready to fire his harpoon. But before he could do so, someone from behind cut him in half, brutally killing him. This catches everyone's attention. The UA student recognizes the figure and smiles, saying, "Uzi, you're fine, don't worry, everything will be fine," but he stops when he realizes that something is wrong with his friend. In fact, the worker drone's face was replaced by the solver symbol, its teeth were sharp and protruding, as it walked slowly towards the group. Large draconic wings, even longer than those of the murder drones, sprouted from its back, and a long tail that ended in a skeletal tip. "Oh no, damn it," Izuku says, intimidated as he steps back slightly from Uzi, who only gets closer. Meanwhile, on the ice where everyone was, a long, monstrous figure approaches, swimming under the ice, which cracks slightly as it passes. Izuku watched in terror as Uzi approached him with a long, terrifying smile before letting out a small chuckle and sprinting towards the human. But J promptly flies towards the worker drone, hitting it with his body, causing it to go off course. "Uzi, what's happening to you?" the UA student asks in panic. "I don't know, but it's not good," says the murder drone as she activates her sword hand. The purple-haired girl who had fallen onto the ice got up as if she were awake, but behind her the ice shattered as something large emerged. It was a large, sea serpent-looking wrecker with spider-like legs attached to part of its torso that it used to stay upright on the ice around the crater its emergence had caused. "Pretend the sky is night." The monster roars menacingly at the worker drone and uses one of its paws to try to crush her, but she, with a lightning-fast move, dodges the attack, landing on the enemy's head and piercing his eye with her pointed tail. The aquatic scrapper roars in pain and attempts to get the unwanted guest off him. After a few seconds, Uzi jumps into the air and spreads his wings, then cleanly cuts off the sea serpent's head, which sinks into the depths of the frozen lake. But before he could completely sink from the severed neck, the professor comes out covered in oil and says, "Okay, coming here was a bad idea." Then the purple-haired robot suddenly turns towards the human, the murder drones and the worker drones and starts flying towards them. Izuku, V, J and N dodge Uzi's impact and prepare to fight, even though most weren't exactly sure what to do. V hits Uzi in the face with his tail and then kicks her in the stomach, sending her flying and crashing into a tree. "New body, same horrors, I bet. CYN. The short-haired murder drone asked sarcastically as she headed towards the worker drone who was still on the ground. Spend. Izuku, J and N think in unison, but to the latter that name seemed strangely familiar. Meanwhile, V is about to stab the purple-haired girl in the chest with his sword hand, but the hero in training promptly uses Black Whip to block the limb of his friend enemy. "Oh come on, let me kill her," the disassembly drone says irritably, but suddenly the worker's pointed tail reveals itself as a mouth that bites V's shoulder and then throws her away. Before she could do anything, however, N grabbed her and said, "Okay, calm down, friend." The purple-haired girl's eyes return to normal, but she doesn't have time to say anything because the murder drone, with superhuman strength, throws her into the air, making her rise above the clouds. The UA student watches the drone disappear from view and then looks at his drone disassembler friend and says, "Hey N, can you launch me too?" Meanwhile in heaven, we can see the robot girl with wings completely wrapping around her body starting to fall. The camera moves showing that Izuku is also falling with her. "Hey Uzi, you wanna tell me what's wrong?" asks the hero in training. "No. Don't look at me, I'm horrible, I think I eat people and stuff." The worker drone replies, "Yes, I think we will have to seriously address that part, but that's not what I mean," the UA student says, opening the drone's wings, revealing that he was slightly crying. "Are you going to leave me? When will you find a way back to your world?" the girl asks. "Uzi, I I don't want to leave you. Maybe when I find a way back, you can come with me. You know, you think you'd like the land. When I ended up here, I was terrified, but you came along and made things less scary, and I'm grateful, the green-haired boy suggests. Hearing this, the robot blushes and then hugs the human, who happily hugs her back. But then the UA student realizes that the two were still falling and says, Uzi, I just realized we're still falling and we're getting dangerously close to the ground. The worker drone looks down and realizes that they were indeed about to crash into the ground and says, oh, bite me. But before they could touch the ground, Jay appears out of nowhere and grabs them both, landing them gently. Honestly, I'd rather keep you from getting squashed to death than bite you, says the pigtailed drone, letting the two go. The purple-haired girl looks at the murder drone and the human and then says shamefully, guys, I'm sorry. Oh, don't worry, it's not like you killed anyone, at least someone who doesn't deserve it. We'll solve everything together, replies the hero in training with a nervous laugh, making both robot girls smile. Shortly after, we can see the bus leaving towards the colony. Inside we can see almost all the campers sitting. V was sitting with Lizzie, who was holding Pointy, who was sleeping, in her hands, while Izuku and Uzi were sitting together with the latter, who was sleeping on the human's shoulder. The sun begins to rise in the distance and the green-haired boy notices that as soon as the sun touches the worker drone's hand, it begins to burn. The hero promptly moves Uzi's hand into the shadows, but for an involuntary moment the robotic hand tightens around his, making him blush deeply. Izuku thinks for a moment before deciding to leave his hand as it is and fall asleep next to Uzi. Meanwhile, we can see Delta hiding in the trees watching the school bus move away from the forest, a sign that his plan had failed. His eyes focus on the UA student and the lizard robot lets out a low mechanical growl of anger, frustration, and pure hatred. Behind him, the remaining scrapper with wings lands. He looks at the ground in shame and tries to make a noise, but is grabbed by the head by his superior. The winged monster wriggles in a desperate attempt to free itself, but it's all in vain as the grip begins to become painful. The lizard robot does nothing for a few moments before letting out a short roar and crushing the winged scrapper's head, killing it instantly. Having done this, the mechanical reptile looks back at the worker drone's vehicle, which was now barely visible, and narrows its eyes. As soon as the sun touches his back, Delta turns and begins to walk into the heart of the forest, quickly disappearing among the dark trees. We can now see Izuku walking around the worker drone colony, looking around as the various humanoid robots walk and talk to each other. I wonder if Uzi is back from school yet, the green-haired human thinks to himself as he reaches his friend's apartment, seeing her sitting on a chair. Hey, I see you finished school today, the UA student says to the drone girl, who responds by saying, today was already more boring than usual, you know, it would be a little nicer if you started hanging out there. Thanks for the offer, but I honestly don't think I could attend both your school and UA without going crazy in the process, the human says with a small laugh. Hearing this, the robot groans in annoyance and rolls her eyes. Anyway, I chatted with N and J and they seem weird, says the purple-haired drone, intriguing her friend, who asks, what do you mean? They told me that since they got back from that camping mess they've been having some kind of weird flashbacks about a scary mansion or something, Uzi replies. N once mentioned to me that he had some sort of dream flashback, but I didn't know Jay had them too. Do you think V has them too? Asks the hero in training. I'm not sure, but she definitely knows something we don't, but we have to find out. However, there is no villa on the maps of the planet, so at least we have confirmation that the murder drones are coming from Earth, says the worker drone. Well, at least it's something, reflects the green-haired boy, leaning his back against the wall of the room. Silence falls in the room for almost a minute until Uzi, with blushing cheeks, clears his throat and says, hey, speaking of other things, I have to tell you something pretty important in my room. Oh, okay, says the UA student and then follows his friend into her room, which was quite messy, which honestly didn't surprise him too much. So what was it you wanted to tell me? Izuku asks the worker drone, who tries to speak, but despite his best efforts nothing comes out of her lips. After a few attempts, the robot girl stops trying to speak and says briefly, "Oh, bite me," and crashes her lips with those of the green-haired human, making his eyes widen and he blushes very heavily. At that precise moment the drone's mind was a veritable chaos of madness. "Ah, what the hell is wrong with you? You had one chance, Uzi, one. And you blew it in the worst way possible, thinks the drone, already expecting the human to refuse. But to her great surprise she feels the boy she was kissing her back, which shocked her, but she doesn't complain and enjoys the beautiful moment. Meanwhile, in the murder drone's pod, we can see Jay playing with a junkyard skull, but suddenly he has a strange feeling and says, "I don't know why, but I suddenly have a great urge to kill someone." "Yes, you're finally back to normal," says V happily, but the pigtailed robot interrupts her happiness by saying curtly, "Stop it, I said I have a desire. Not that I will do it, nor will I let you do it, so settle for the scrap dealers and don't be a pain in the ass." "Ugh, it's so much fun," complains the short-haired murder drone, crossing her arms. "Hey girls, did you know that the Kangal dog has the most powerful bite of the entire species? Do you think it exerts a pressure of 700 pounds? Crazy, right?" says N, entering the pod. The two drone girls look at each other and then look up at the sky and go back to what they were doing before. Returning to the colony, finally that passionate kiss is interrupted by the human's need for oxygen as he looks at the drone with amazed eyes. "Izuku, listen, I like you, really a lot, and when I say a lot I mean a lot. I don't care if you're a human and I'm a drone, and I want to be by your side whether it's in this world or yours, like you told me. I love you, Izuku Midoriya." The hero in training remains silent for a few seconds before grabbing the robot girl's hand and saying, "I love you too, Uzi Dorman," before kissing his now girlfriend again. After this second kiss is over, the worker drone looks away in embarrassment and says, I know it seems rushed, but since it's a certain hour, can we sleep together?" Hearing this, the human blushes brightly and says between stammers, "OKW, why not?" At this moment the UA student was in a mix of emotions and questions. He was damn happy to have a girlfriend, he was perplexed by the visions of the murder drones, and he was slightly nervous about how he would introduce his new robot girlfriend to his mother when he returned to his world, but in the end he decided that he would think about everything at a later time. So the two, still damn embarrassed, lie down on Uzi's bed with her resting her head on Izuku's chest, listening intently to his heartbeat as if her whole world depended on it, and it probably did. Meanwhile, we can see Delta walking through the snow nervously with his eyes glowing with pure primal hatred. Avizu, Tai Zelisa, Adumau, Atot Selivek Teba Destvitelno Bespakoit. I see you're angry, I guess that human is really bothering you. Doll's voice can be heard from behind the scrapper, who turns around suddenly seeing the drone that was following him. Il mostro meccanico rugus infastidito. I know our previous alliance didn't work out, but at least your boss didn't find out. So c'è la nostra precedent all'inza non è andata bene, ma almeno il tuo capo non ti ha scoperto, commenta la robot russa. The iron lizard seems to calm down slightly, and noticing this, the worker drone smiles creepily, activating a solver symbol in front of her right eye while saying, "Uvero teba, na adot raz budit luce, I assure you, this time it will be better." Delta makes a noise in agreement, making Doll smile even more as she knows she still has a powerful ally. We can see Izuku heading towards the murder drone's base while his now girlfriend Uzi remained at the colony. Uzi said that J and N were having flashbacks to a strange mansion. Maybe they are regaining memories of their life before arriving on Copper 9. I really hope so, because they might have crucial information, the hero in training thinks to himself. Eventually the human reaches the corpse house and enters, seeing Jay sitting on top of the pod. "Hey Jay, it's me," greets the green-haired boy, getting the robot's attention. Her eyes light up and she quickly jumps towards him, saying, "Oh, it's you. N told me that purple hair told him that you two are together now, congratulations," says the disassembler drone, even though there was a slight twitch in her left eye. Thanks a lot. By the way, where are N and V?" asks the human, not seeing the other two drones around. "Oh yeah, those two went for a walk, you know, I think they're starting to develop some chemistry," says the pigtailed drone, looking up at the sky. "Really? Well, I'm glad they're getting along," says the green-haired boy with a chuckle. "Speaking of other things, what are you doing at the colony?" asks the murder drone. "Uzi and I are planning how to handle your internal programming that erases your memory of your past," explains Izuku. "Oh really? I hope you get there before V kills any more worker drones," says the robot, looking bitter for a few seconds, then changing to one of indifference. Noticing this, the UA student is about to say something but is interrupted by Jay, who says, "Anyway, do you want to go for a walk?" Don't worry about the scrap dealers, I took a walk and didn't see any around. Oh well, that sounds like a good idea to me, says the hero in training. So the human and the drone begin to walk through the snowy, nighttime streets of Copper 9. The boy looks at the girl next to him and notices that she is looking in the distance at some corpses of worker drones with expressions of bitterness and guilt. After a few seconds, Izuku decides to ask his friend with a slightly worried tone, "Hey Jay, are you okay?" The girl with the pigtails suddenly freezes and then says, what? Of course I'm fine. Perfect and functional as always, hey, with a nervous laugh. Jay, if there's something that's bothering you, you can tell me freely and I won't judge you at all, you have my word, says the green-haired boy. Finally the facade of the murder drone disappears, replaced by an expression of bitterness. Okay, you see, when Uzi had me beat and was about to kill me, I was scared. I was terrified as I watched her towering over me, and I can't help but think that that's what all the worker drones I've killed over the years felt. Then I started getting to know them and more or less becoming friends, and I realized they had hopes and desires and families, and I just destroyed them without thinking. In fact, I thought it was the right thing to do. Sometimes I wonder why you're so friendly with me knowing what I've done, Jay explains as a few tears form on her screen face. The UA student remains silent, listening to his friend's outburst, and when it finally calms down he decides to hug her, making her eyes widen and blush slightly. Listen, what you, N, and V did was wrong. That's obvious, but it's also what you were supposed to do. We don't have all the pieces of this crazy puzzle yet, but you've changed, you've become a better person. That's why I like you, explains the green-haired boy. Hearing this, Jay blushes even more and then begins to return the green-haired human's hug. But the good time is interrupted when 3 scrappers notice the duo and start running towards them to attack them. Oh, are you kidding me? The murder drone asks, extremely annoyed, as she breaks the hug and activates her sword hand, and the human activates One for All. The drill-handed robot attempts to strike the murder drone with its deadly limb, however it dodges by flying and stabs it in the neck with its sword. However, the blow does not kill it and it tries to wriggle out of its way to get the unwanted guest off. Meanwhile, Izuku faces both the 4-legged and one-eyed scrapper, using his black whip to grab the spider-legged one and then hurl him into the other. In the meantime, Drill Hand grabs Jay and throws her to the ground, but she quickly gets up, dodging an attack. The Cyclops robot tries to punch the hero in training, but he ducks and the blow hits his spider legs, which makes him recoil in pain. Jay dodges yet another attack from the drill and then cuts it cleanly with a clean blow of his sword, making the enemy roar in pain. The disassembly drone picks up the severed limb and smashes it into the owner's skull, killing him instantly. Meanwhile, Spider Legs tries to stab the UA student with his spiked legs, but he dodges the attack by passing and runs under the iron monster and then punches him using 20% of One for All. The punch is so powerful that it breaks through the metal of the robot's head, destroying the circuitry and killing it. Meanwhile, the Cyclops wrecker attempts to attack but is stopped when the murder drone starts shooting at him with its machine gun hand. The projectiles do not inflict fatal damage but still manage to push the enemy back. The green-haired boy takes advantage of this to shoot several black whip tentacles, making them enter the bullet holes in the scrapper's body, and after a few seconds they emerge, creating other larger holes, one of them in the monster's luminous eye, making it turn off, a sign that it was dead. Once the situation had calmed down, the human and the drone finally took deep breaths. Well, nice workout, a bit unexpected but nice, the UA student says ironically while taking a breath. Yeah, anyway, thanks for your words, Izuku. I needed them, says the murder drone with a small smile. But suddenly Jay feels something wrong inside her, and before she could say anything her screen face starts glitching for a few seconds and then goes off and she falls to the ground, shocking the human in front of her. Izuku was in absolute panic. He was in Uzi's room and in front of him were N, J and V on the floor unconscious. Okay, I think I understand what's going on, says the purple-haired girl as she types on a screen. So, does it have something to do with that program that erases their past memories? Asks the green-haired boy worriedly. Exactly, only now he's going to give him some kind of digital lobotomy, says the worker drone. What? Is there anything we can do to stop this process? Asks the worried hero. Well, maybe, but to do that I'll have to get into their memories. This attempt to lobotomize them gives us the opportunity to access their blocked memories, explains the robot girl. So, are we going to get into their minds? Asks the slightly confused UA student. Well, not exactly. I'll be able to possess a small element of memory to prevent whatever is affecting them from turning them into mechanical vegetables, Uzi continues, tapping away at the keys on the keyboard. World I remember. After a few minutes of hacking, the worker drone finally managed to enter N's memories and takes control of a purple-eyed crow. It flies through a dark forest on what appears to be the Earth until it reaches a large tree surrounded by many dead worker drones. But in the center of it was N chained to the tree trunk. Strangely, he looked like a normal worker drone. So the murder drones, were they normal workers? Asks the green-haired boy. So it would seem, and apparently they actually come from Earth, although I'm starting to doubt that they were sent by humans. There's something very big going on, says the green-haired girl. Suddenly some normal crows start pecking at the robot boy, trying to tear him apart, and at that point Uzi decides to intervene and chase the other birds away and explain the situation to them. So this is a memory, and future me died on a date with V? Asks past N. More or less, and you're not dead, you're unconscious, says the crow in Izuku's voice, and then switches to Uzi's voice when he says, an internal program is trying to erase these memories and we're here to help you. So the possessed crow picks up a large stone in its claws and drops it on the chain, breaking it and freeing the drone. What we're going to do is figure out what happened here, restore your memories, and prevent all three of you from being digitally lobotomized, the bird says, taking up the green-haired human's voice. Then to the basement library, adds the crow, returning to the voice of the drone girl, to which N responds with a simple, okay. You know, you look a little bit like some kind of wizard ghost, N adds as he walks away. We are magical ghosts, and I'm very tall. Uzi lies with a chuckle, but then Izuku interrupts her saying, no, that's not true, you're of average height and you're adorable just the way you are. Shut up Izu daddy. Get out of my room. The crow screams in a female voice before falling to the ground. Real world. We can see that the two teenagers were disconnected from the memory because Khan had suddenly entered the room. We're in the middle of a very major hack. The worker drone hisses at her father, who responds with, okay, I just wanted to say you've never had friends over before. It's not a pajama party. The robot says abruptly, then closes the door with the power of the solver. Oh, and I also wanted to say we could use the help of your human friend boyfriend. A large group of scrappers are piling up at the magnificent and beautiful front door, Khan says from behind. The human and the drone look at each other for a few seconds, with the former saying, you think about them, I'll manage. The purple-haired girl nods and then goes back to taking control of the crow in the murder drone's minds. Meanwhile, outside the colony, we can see a really large group of scrap dealers who were in front of the entrance door of the colony. One had a square body with long, zigzagging limbs and had a single large red eye. Another was a large two-handed torso with two large sharp claws and a skull-like head that was attached to a tractor. Another had no head. In fact, the red eye was in the center of the chest and its arms were extremely long. In fact, they were able to touch the ground. The latest one had a humanoid body. The metal it was made of was snow white, its claws were razor sharp, and there were some exposed electrical cables on its back. Another was the largest of the group. It was made of various pieces of iron held together by metal cables. Its mouth was wide open and it had sharp shards of glass in place of teeth. One had a round body with a red eye on each side and had 6 spider-like legs instead of legs. The umpteenth one had a slightly rounded body, and instead of hands they had some kind of military javelins and wheels instead of legs. There is also one that had a canine body and a long flat tail. The last one was a humanoid being with bull horns made of iron, and attached to its torso were sticks of dynamite ready to explode. Of course, in the center of the group was Delta, who shoots his energy beam at the door, leaving a large black mark on it. Suddenly a red solver sign appears in front of the door, which slowly starts to rise, but before the wreckers could enter to make a massacre, they see the UA student in front of them with a serious look on his face. The lizard robot growls in annoyance and then signals for its minions to attack, which they do. The first to attack is the one with the javelin hands, who tries to impale the human, who however jumps into the air, grabbing him with black whip and making him crash into Delta, who however catches him in midair and throws him away carelessly. As soon as Izuku hits the ground, The scrap tractor tries to run him over, but he jumps onto the hood and hits the robot's head in the face with 35% of the one for all, detaching it cleanly. The humanoid robot runs after the hero in training and attempts to stab him with its claws, but the human notices it and grabs the arm and with all his strength slams it violently to the ground. Replace Bakugo with the scrapper. Before the mechanical monster can get back up, its head is crushed by Izuku's foot as he uses 20% OFA on his foot. The spider-legged robot runs towards the green-haired boy, but he gets under the enemy and hits his various legs until he falls to the ground. An enraged Delta charges his energy beam and fires it at Izuku, who dodges, causing the beam to hit the round scrapper, causing it to explode. The four-legged robot jumps on the UA student, pinning him to the ground. His mouth immediately opens and a black whip tentacle emerges from it and wraps itself around the enemy's head. The mechanical dog tries to free his head, but the black tentacle begins to tighten around his skull until it crushes him. Immediately after, the robot's lifeless body falls on top of the human, who groans under the crushing weight of the metal corpse. Taking advantage of this, the zigzag-limbed scrapper and the headless one walk towards the trapped human, ready to attack him. However, with 37% of one for all, the body of the four-legged robot is thrown away and crashes into zigzagging limbs that fall to the ground due to the violent impact. The headless robot attempts to punch the human, but he dodges the attack and then grabs his arm and detaches it, using it to stab his enemy's eye, killing him. Meanwhile, with his hands in a zigzag, he gets up and runs towards the hero in training, but he simply hits him with the 35% of the one for all straight to the chest, and he immediately falls to the ground dead. The green-haired boy looks in front of him and sees that only Delta, TNT Toro and the bigger one are left. The latter began to run towards him, with the bull activating a lighter he had in place of a finger and setting fire to the fuse of the dynamite on his chest. Izuku stands still for a few seconds watching the two scrappers run towards him and then jumps into the air as soon as the two robots get too close and the bull's fuse almost reaches the canister. Soon after, the bull wrecker explodes, killing himself and the other bigger one, while Izuku stayed in the air using float. Delta growls in annoyance and is ready to charge his energy beam, but notices that in front of the entrance door of the colony there is Doll holding Uzi's mechanical cockroach and gesturing to the mechanical robot. The mechanical lizard growled briefly before turning and running away. Even the green-haired human looks down and widens his eyes in concern when he sees Doll teleporting away. Uzi! Screams the terrified UA student as he deactivates float and runs towards his girlfriend's room. Much to his relief, Uzi was fine and the murder drones were awake again and didn't look like vegetables. "Well, I guess it went well," the green-haired boy says to his girlfriend, who proudly says, "Yeah, I had a moment of conflict with Doll, but well, I managed to handle it." But V growls in annoyance, activating her chainsaw hand and saying, "How dare you get into my head?" But J stops her by hitting her in the back of the head, saying, "Hey. 1. They saved us from being lobotomized, and 2. You're not going to kill anyone just because they found out you were wearing glasses," making the other murder drone blush. Meanwhile, somewhere in the snow, we can see Delta and Doll in front of Tessa and her mechanical falcon. The Russian drone throws the cockroach to the human, saying, "Vot, kak I dogovorились here, just as agreed." But suddenly Tessa pulls out a revolver and shoots the robot girl in the face, who doesn't bat an eyelid, and the human says, "Just to be safe." "Now we can get to work," says the astronaut girl, and then turns around with her robot, but notices that behind her were Izuku, Uzi, V, J and N. Everyone looks at each other for a few seconds, leaving the entire area in a deathly silence. Meanwhile, at the scrapper's base, we can see the toymaker still in the shadows working on a new underling when Javelin Arms enters his workshop and begins speaking to his master in an unknown language about Delta's deal with Doll. Hearing this, the toymaker growls in annoyance and his eyes glow red as he says in a mechanical voice with a slight English accent, "Damn traitor, it's time to solve this story and avenge my beloved creators personally." The silence between the three groups was almost awkward, but after a few seconds it was finally broken. Tessa, N asks confusedly to the human girl, who in response runs towards him and hugs him, saying, "N. Do you remember? Whoa, you've grown so tall and incredible. I could kiss you, if air wasn't toxic. Oh, and who are these two? And why haven't you died yet without a helmet?" Before turning to the worker and the hero. Suddenly Uzi bites the astronaut's hand and asks, "Bite me? What are you doing here, human? Please excuse my girlfriend." I'm Izuku Midoriya and I'm not dead yet because I'm from another dimension and my body can withstand the atmosphere, the green-haired boy explains briefly, placing a hand on Uzi's shoulder. Wow, that's crazy. Anyway, the reason I'm here is that Canyon left Earth and my little Olbert and I came here to get rid of her, says the astronaut. In short, you ran away, Jay says dryly as he crosses his arms. Anyway, its last known action was to tease you here on the human exoplanet, the astronaut says, pointing to the murder drones. But why would he do that? What does he have in mind? The UA student asks Tessa, who responds by saying, that's what we're trying to find out. But then suddenly Doll uses the solver symbol to take the green beetle from Tessa's hands and bring it back to her. Once this is done, the Russian drone touches Delta with its free hand and the two teleport in fits and starts towards an industrial complex. Oh, I didn't expect that, says the human astronaut. Shortly after, the whole group chases Doll and Delta through the compound. Izuku tries to grab her with Black Whip, Jay shoots missiles at her, and Tessa fires her revolver. However, the scrapper fires his energy beam in the direction of the group who dodges the attack, but he takes advantage of the situation to jump together with his ally into a large dark crater. Olbert, give our friends a refresher on Sin's plan, the human asks the mechanical hawk, who opens his beak wide and a small hologram appears showing the planet Copper 9. Phase 1. Clear the drop zone of lifeforms and build the spire. Phase 2. Enter the lab with this symbol, the bird says in a mechanical voice as the hologram changes to a text that says, Cabin Fever, with the same symbol on N's hat next to it. Not that there's much to turn off, but if Canyon wants these labs then we have to destroy them and that cockroach was our access key, says the human. Olbert, take care of my ship, commands the astronaut as he throws some keys to his Iron Falcon, which catches them in its beak and flies away. But what does all this have to do with Doll and the scrap dealers? Asks Izuku. Yes, this story is still too complicated, comments Uzi harshly. She thinks the humans did something to her people here, giving them a disease she inherited, and maybe she's right, anyway. As for the scrappers, their boss is convinced the worker drones killed their creators. It's straight out of a movie, right? Anyway, are you coming or what? Tessa explains, then jumps down into the crater. The group, human, worker drone and murder drones look at each other for a moment and then jump in turn. So everyone lands on the ground with N holding Tessa in his arms preventing her from getting squashed. However, everyone notices that the entire underground building is full of murder drone corpses with various oil-based writings that read, no, 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 or, don't look them in the eye. I forgot to tell you that the whole place has a security system created just for you, Tessa says, sitting down at a desk. Everyone watches the show a little worried, especially because of the graffiti and the dead bodies. But don't worry, humans created these security measures and this human will check them. Maybe, says Tessa taking a piece of paper with, access denied, written on it. What's the problem? Izuku whispers to En, who whispers back, I don't know, I didn't remember these strange behaviors. Anything to thwart Sin's plans, says V as he walks through the corridors of the facility. And to discover Uzi's mother's secrets, adds Izuku, making his girlfriend who is holding his hand smile and blush. Jay notices this and gives off a slightly bitter expression for a few seconds. But suddenly some kind of lasso grabs Tessa's leg and quickly drags her away with her saying, I don't particularly like this part, so save me quickly, thanks. Everyone immediately runs towards the lasso until they reach a corridor with blue lights, but as soon as they start walking, the sound of a child laughing is heard, causing the group to step back and look out, seeing a robot bundle at the end of the corridor. I think I'm going to have nightmares for a while, what should we do? The UA student comments in a low voice. Shall we shoot the kid now? Suggests the purple-haired drone. Wait, what? Jay and Izuku shout in unison. It's already too long now. En shouts in terror as he comes out of his hiding place and starts shooting at the bundle. From here, several tentacles emerge and he starts challenging the bullets. Eventually the little robot runs away into a ventilation duct. I don't know exactly what just happened and I don't know if I really want to know, says the green-haired boy as he and the others head towards the place where the child has taken refuge. But suddenly from behind the group appears the arm of a murder drone whose hand is some kind of taser. Everyone immediately turns around and sees that at the beginning of the corridor there is a female drone worker with a chastisement with some kind of horns to which knives and other dangerous objects are attached. "Hello, surface losers," says the robot woman with a creepy smile, and immediately afterward, the taser arm on the ground begins to glow and then unleashes a kind of shock wave that knocks everyone unconscious. Time after, we can see Uzi wake up and notice that she was tied to an operating table and had a magnet on her head. Then he looks around and sees that next to her were J and V also tied to operating tables and with magnets on their heads. Suddenly the horned drone uses one of its gadgets to activate the light above it, saying, "The sentries have us targeted, I'm trying not to waste the best parts." Then the woman goes towards J and is about to cut off her head with an axe but is stopped by Uzi, who says, "Hey, if you take those parts you'll get a creepy crossover." The crazy drone thinks for a while and then heads towards Uzi saying, "You know, it's been a while since we've seen any witches around, at least not since O2 left us to die," while touching the necklace on Uzi's neck. Saying this, the girl with purple hair widens her eyes when she realizes that he was talking about her mother. Meanwhile, Izuku also wakes up with a start seeing that he is tied to a bed. Next to her was Tessa, and on the other side of the room N, who was being tortured by the robot child while saying, "Ahahaha, it tickles but it's not funny." The human opens his eyes wide and uses his quirk to break his restraints, so he slowly gets up from the operating table and walks towards the enemy before knocking him out with 20% of One for All. "Oh my god, I hit a child," the UA student says in a panic, but a liberated woman comments, "Don't worry, he was really mean." Meanwhile, we can now see a large room with strange, monstrous figures moving in the shadows. Suddenly a door swings open, attracting the attention of the creatures who emit guttural noises. The toymaker comes out of the door and is clearly visible for the first time. He has a humanoid torso and head with 6 glowing red eyes implanted in it. Instead of legs he has a long snake-like tail, and he has about 10 arms to which operating tools such as scalpels or forceps were attached. "Look at you, splendid creations of humanity exploited by those worker drone parasites who have been its downfall," says the robot as the shadowed creatures walk towards him menacingly. "But don't worry, now I will give you a new and greater purpose," concludes the toymaker while his eyes shine with an intense light. Suddenly, even the creatures' eyes turn from light blue to blood red. Meanwhile, "So how do you know my mom? Was she cool, or was she boring?" Uzi asked as the cannibal drone called Alice grabbed some tongs from a bucket. "Oh, you really do look a lot like her, to be honest, except for the yellow eyes," the adult giggles, then begins to tear off Uzi's finger with the pliers as he screams in pain. Meanwhile, we can now see Tessa, Izuku and En hiding in an office as they see the robot child named Bo, who had recovered and was running frantically towards Alice's room. "Do you think the others are in there?" asks the green-haired boy worriedly. "Don't worry, we'll get J and V back," Tessa says as she works on a computer on a small desk. "So what about Uzi?" En asks his human friend, who turns around once the screen lights up bright yellow and asks, "Do you want to see Earth?" "I'd like to tell you yes, but now is not the time to," the hero in training tries to say but is interrupted when Tessa steps aside, showing a satellite image that showed the Earth completely destroyed with some kind of energy tentacles holding the fragments still in space. "My good god," Izuku asks in shock as he watches the spectacle on the screen. "We know that it mutated from damaged ice, took Canyon as its first host, and then took over the entire planet. Humans saw what was happening and tried to understand them, but in the end they did nothing but spread that entity," the astronaut explains. "So Uzi, wait, why, you can fix this, right? That's why you're here?" asks the UA student worried about his girlfriend. "I'm here to figure out which drones have been infected. Once I get to the lab and get the list, I'll need you two to choose the universe and not a small drone," the human says, placing her hand on En's shoulder, who seems unsure of what to do. "What? No, Uzi is my girlfriend. I can't hurt her and I never will. I'll find a way to cure her and together we'll get rid of the solver," Izuku retorts. "But what if you can't? What if that thing takes over her completely and after it's done with this world, it moves on to yours?" Tessa asks, tilting her head slightly. Before the hero can slam the door shut, it swings open and the toymaker emerges, followed by a small horde of raptor-like robots. "Oh, are you kidding me?" asks the exasperated UA student as the group of robot dinosaurs roars at him. Two sentries run towards the green-haired boy, but he dodges and hits one of them, knocking him to the ground. The other mechanical raptor is about to bite the hero but is stopped by the scrapper, who says, "Stop. It's human. Think about drones. And then leave." So the lizard shoots a kind of flash in front of En, making him fall to the ground stunned, but before he could jump on him, Izuku grabs him by the tail and throws him away. Meanwhile, Bo and Alice watch the whole scene on monitors, with the latter eating batteries like they were popcorn and saying, "I wasn't expecting the bigwig from the scrap dealers, but I don't mind." But suddenly a large golden solver symbol appears in front of the screens and everything starts levitating. Alice turns around and sees Uzi with yellow eyes, who says in the solver's voice, "Oh, don't worry about me." Immediately after, the desk with the door controls explodes, causing all the doors to open. After this, the worker drone's eyes return to normal and she faints. Alice immediately runs to the door leading to their room and tries to close it manually. She turns around for a second saying, "Bo, help me," but stops when she turns around again and finds herself face to face with the toymaker and two sentries. The king of the scrappers stabs the cannibal drone with a sharp hand, making her scream in pain as he says, "What a terrible surgeon you are, let me show you how a real operation is done," and then smashed her face in with a pair of pliers. Once done, the two sentries enter the room followed by their master, who heads towards a still unconscious Uzi. Bo charges a laser beam using one of his tentacles, but then looks at J and V tied to the tables and decides to use the beam to cut the ropes holding them down. This obviously draws attention to him, and in fact one of the sentries jumps on him and tears him to pieces. But the two murder drones take off and J runs towards the toymaker and tackles him before he could kill the worker drone. Meanwhile, V takes some glasses from the ground and puts them on her face and then stabs a sentry who was attacking her in the head. Back to J, she is thrown away by the robot with the snake tail, who says, "Little insolent," but is interrupted when the disassembler drone fires a rocket in front of him, sending him flying backwards. Having done this quickly, the braided drone picks up Uzi and together with V they fly out of the room before the toymaker can recover. Meanwhile, Tessa and Izuku are in front of an N still unconscious from the sentry's flash while he is lying on a bed. Suddenly the drone boy regains consciousness and moans in pain and then looks at his two friends. "And now don't say I never do anything, foe," Tessa says, but is interrupted when the ceiling collapses and V and J fall out, the latter holding an unconscious Uzi on her shoulders. "Girls, Uzi is," N tries to ask but is interrupted by V, who says, "Hurt, and you said you could control the sentries," referring to Tessa. But then the worker drone wakes up and looks around, and when she sees the girl with green hair she says, "Izuku," and then runs towards him and hugs him, and he immediately returns the hug. The hug quickly turns into a kiss. Once it's over, the two lovers look at each other even though he doesn't know exactly what to say to her about what the astronaut explained to him. Shortly after, we can now see the group heading towards the elevator, keeping an eye out for any sentries or the toymaker around. When they reach the elevator, everyone notices that Doll and Delta are inside, lying on the ground with their eyes flashing the word error, implying that they had been hit by the sentries. Flashes. "Okay, that's definitely a trap," Jay comments. "Yeah, so it's better," Uzi tries to say as she's about to activate a solver symbol but is stopped by everyone saying in unison, "No." The drone girl looks confused at everyone, especially at her boyfriend, but before she could ask a question, Tessa, who was inside the elevator, says, "Pretty comfortable, right?" while holding the robot cockroach. So the group begins to walk towards the human, but as soon as they reach her, Doll and Delta wake up and the former takes the mechanical insect out of Tessa's hands for the second time and uses it to activate the elevator, which slowly begins to descend. At the same time, the Russian uses a solver symbol to activate all the doors in the corridor from which sentries come out. The drone and the lizard monster did this by teleporting away, leaving the group to their fate. Uzi immediately tries to activate his symbol, but his hand begins to distort and a hole forms in the wall, allowing the group to enter the elevator. End of the line. "Damn drones, what?" says the toymaker as he steps out of the shadows, but stops when he sees that the energy released by the Uzi symbol is having an effect on the sentries. In fact, the eyes of the mechanical dinosaurs turn from red to golden yellow, and some of them jump on their previous master, who, however, manages to defend himself. V, J and Tessa fight off the approaching sentries while Izuku and N attempt to help the worker drone who was losing control of her powers. B-boy, I can't control it. The purple-haired girl says in panic, but suddenly the murder drone, in a desperate gesture, cuts off her arm, causing the symbol to dissolve. So Tessa and Jay enter the elevator while V is still fighting with some sentries. Izuku tries to help her but a sentry tackles him and slams him against a column before trying to bite him. While fighting, Toymaker notices the green-haired boy in trouble and shouts, "No!" Then quickly crawling towards his former subordinate and smashing his face in with a scalpel. Having done this quickly, he grabs the student Ua and together with him jumps inside the elevator where En and Uzi had also got on. "Come quickly," the drone boy shouts to his crush as he notices the elevator slowly descending. The disassembler drone cuts off the head of another sentry and is about to head back to its companions, but another raptor hits it, knocking off its glasses and exposing it to the flashes. "No, no, no V. We need you," the drone boy shouts desperately, but she smiles and says, "Nah, Uzi and Izuku, I trust you too," and at that moment several sentries surround her. Then V looks at En one last time and then says, "En, I love you," but she doesn't have time to finish the sentence that a sentry who was next to her opens his jaws and the elevator cables break, making it and consequently Izuku, Tessa, Uzi, En, Jay and the Toymaker fall into the darkness underground. The elevator crashed to the ground and quickly everyone got out of it, and immediately after in front of it several rocks fell blocking the passage. "No, no, no, V," says a desperate En as he starts to remove the stones, but there are too many. Meanwhile, Izuku turns to meet the Toymaker's gaze and asks him, "You saved me, but why?" "It's my job to serve and protect humanity. I thought there were no humans left on this planet, but I was wrong. And now I will protect you from these drones," says the king of the scrap dealers, and then stands in front of the human to protect him. "Hey, we didn't start this war, the humans on this planet did themselves in," Jay says annoyed. "Lie. Even if what you said were true, I know very well that you destroyed the Earth," replies the Toymaker. "Listen guys, we have to stay focused now, and we'll save V after we get the list and after we solve the problem," explains Tessa turning to Uzi. The purple-haired drone begins to back away slightly as the human pulls out a medieval sword. Izuku promptly gets past the Toymaker and steps in front of his girlfriend to protect her, which Jay does as well. Seeing this, the robotic monster tilts his head slightly confused. If drones wiped out humanity, then why was that human defending a drone? "Oh, what the hell is going on?" asks the worker drone as she backs away even further. "Nothing. We don't know everything yet, but we won't hurt you," says En looking at Tessa. "Hurt me?" asks the purple-haired drone, no longer knowing who to trust. "Uzi, don't worry, as long as I'm here you won't," the UA student tries to say before being stopped when out of nowhere a solver symbol appears on his girlfriend's hand and quickly turns from purple to yellow. The symbol's energy begins to further collapse the roof of the cave, causing Uzi to become separated from the rest of the group. No, damn it. Why can't things ever go right?" The hero in training asks desperately as he notices that Tessa has disappeared and that En has his arms stuck in the rocks. "Damn it, Toymaker. As a human I order you to help serial designation and get out of the rubble," Izuku says to the king of the scrapyards while at the same time thinking, "Please, it works." The robot observes the human for a few seconds, then bows slightly, says, "As you wish," and begins removing the rocks that were holding the murder drone's arm in place. Guys," Jay asks as she looks at something in the distance in shock, so everyone looks in her direction and notices a little worker drone dressed as a waitress in the distance. "Canyon?" En asks shocked as his eyes widen. Nervous laugh. "Hello big brother En," says CYN, and then transforms into a monster whose legs are a centipede tail and on his back he has various tentacles. The beast, with a supernatural leap, arrives in front of the group and uses its tentacles to block them. "Thank you for paving the way for this planet, satisfied tone. As a reward I will give you some answers," says the entity while with other tentacles it touches everyone's foreheads making them have visions. Everyone sees the Earth being attacked by an army of murder drones including N, J and V. Helicopters attempt to shoot the flying robots, however they are impaled by a giant black tentacle that sprouts from a building. Once the viewing was over, everyone was shocked by what they had just seen. Soon after, Sin's figure disappears, leaving only tentacles that begin to drag the group towards the darkness of the cave. The toymaker tries to break the tentacles with some of his mechanical arms, but they don't seem to have any effect. Suddenly the rock is replaced by walls made of flesh, blood and bones. Izuku looks around terrified, not knowing what to do. But suddenly a flying pickaxe cuts all the tentacles clean off, making everyone fall to the ground. A sort of golden cross ends up in Izuku's hands, while a small core with a purple eye that looks at him with a stern look falls on En's chest. Why would Canyon go after her own killer toys? And why the hell is there a human in the leader of the scrapyards? Are you stupid or something? Asks the core in a female voice. Only he's stupid. I'm just a rebel, says Jay, pointing to his companion murder drone, who says, yeah right. Perfect for me then. Better if we go, says the little being as he climbs onto En's head, but at that moment a terrifying roar can be heard in the distance and a huge figure can be seen approaching. Everyone except the core and the toymaker screams in terror as they get up from the ground and run away, with Jay firing a rocket into the air, causing a small cave-in. Listen, we need to get to the surface. I'm looking for a guy named Khan, the mini robot tells the group. Why are you looking for Uzi's father? Izuku asks, confused, but as soon as he says his name the creature raises a hoe and a purple solver symbol appears in front of it and everyone is pinned to the wall. Around the corner the huge creature passes quickly, fortunately not noticing anyone. Soon after the screams and roars fade away, the core moves and stands in front of the UA student's face asking, how do you know my daughter? Izuku's eyes widen in shock when he realizes he's seeing his mother-in-law. Meanwhile, we can see Tessa walk up to a desk with a computer and start typing on the keyboard, and after about a minute she leaves. After a few steps the computer explodes, leaving a wall of fire behind the astronaut. But suddenly a flying cleaver almost hits her, but she catches it in flight and sees that in front of her are Doll and Delta, with the former jumping on her to attack her holding a kitchen knife, but the attack is dodged again. Jed Selivicheskij patch. Where is the patch, human? The Russian drone asks Tessa, who replies, I'm not sure what you're saying. Where is the artifact that can banish the solver's possession? L'artefatto in grado di esorcizer una possession del solver, dave. Chief di nuovo la ragazza robot. So this is what they were doing down here, right? Pretty cool, huh, buddy? The astronaut asks, turning slightly towards Delta, who nods and sits down next to her. What, asks the worker drone, confused by the scrap dealer's betrayal. You know, it's never a good idea to ally yourself with someone who's always ready to switch sides just to survive. Tessa chuckles, then gestures to the lizard monster, who roars and leaps at Doll. Meanwhile, Nori had just finished explaining to the group about the cross that could stop the solver, how she saved Doll's mother, but in doing so inadvertently allowed the solver to briefly access the planet's core. So the planet has half imploded. The humans are apparently almost all dead. I woke up on the surface. I was crazy enough to have a daughter, and the rest is all stupid history, concludes the core. So, all this time I've been leading a guerrilla crusade against an entire species, believing them to be the murderers of my creators when, in reality, they were innocent and it was this solver entity. Asks the toymaker. Basically yes, comments Jay, at which point the king of the scrap dealers lowers his head and says, I suppose I have to apologize. Anyway, now the solver has found a way back to finish the job. Now who is his host? Nori wonders. Well, Uzi and Yiva, Doll's daughter. Izuku says, I know that, kid, I meant which one was trying to kill us. It couldn't be Doll because the lizard junker wasn't with her and Uzi is somewhere else, so, is there a third guest? Asks Jay. It doesn't matter, we have to find them and use the cross to drive Canyon away, she quickly explains, throwing the cross into Izuku's hands, who says, of course. I can't wait to tell Uzi that his mother is, but is stopped when the core slams him against the wall. Tell him I'm alive and I'll make sure humanity is truly extinct, Nori says menacingly. The toymaker tries to intervene, but Jay puts a hand in front of him and shakes his head. I'm sorry, Mrs. Dorman, but I have no intention of lying to Uzi anymore, even if the truth might hurt you, the UA student says firmly. I caused every horror in his life. I contributed to the destruction of the planet. I made sure that the murder drones arrived on the planet, says the core, listing his guilt. You gave her some unholy and mysterious genetics, N adds before being hit on the back of the head by Jay's tail. Promise you won't tell her anything about me, Nori says menacingly to the human, who sighs and then says, I promise. I'll wait until you tell her in person. The core looks up at the sky while saying, bite me, yes she is definitely Uzi's mother, the hero in training thinks to himself. Shortly after, the group exits the cave and ends up in a gigantic cathedral shrouded in shadow. Once inside, everyone saw Tessa and Delta in the center of the room holding Uzi down while the former was about to stab her with the sword, and a few meters away was Doll's corpse with a broken ribcage. J and N promptly stand in front of Tessa, pointing their sword arms at her throat. Delta tries to intervene but Izuku, with 30% of one for all, punches him, making him fly against a column. As soon as he falls to the ground, the toymaker bites him, impaling him with his sharp limbs. You knew about the cross, right? You knew there was a way to save everyone without killing them, and yet you killed Doll. Accuses the green-haired boy. Hee that's really cute, you care so much about your little drone, Tessa says, but is interrupted when J and V cut off her head. The headless corpse takes a few steps back before falling to the ground as the helmet rolls towards a crater at the end of the cathedral. Immediately after, Izuku helps his girlfriend up while saying, "Hey, it's okay, here this will help you," and then handing her the cross. The worker drone with its head still down picks up the cross and then starts laughing and destroys the artifact with a yellow solver symbol. "Touching, darling," Uzi says as he looks up, showing that his eyes were now yellow. Tentacles emerge from the robot girl's back, ending in sickles that impale J and N on the columns while Delta manages to throw the toymaker away and impale him with her pointed tail. A tentacle tries to impale Izuku but he jumps back and shouts, "Uzi, I know you're still in there. This isn't you. You have to fight it." Beautiful words, eyes to the sky, pity that they are completely vain, the solver states coldly, but is interrupted when Nori's pickaxe crashes into his face and she cuts off all his tentacles before landing on the human's shoulder. "Nori, you're dead," says the confused entity, "and you're damn grounded," replies the core. Angry, Canyon says and then regrows a tentacle but is tackled by J, who cuts it off again and then kicks her in the head, making her fall to the ground. Meanwhile, N shoots a laser beam at the other tentacles that were sprouting from his possessed friend's back. Izuku takes advantage of this to use Black Whip to completely block his girlfriend, and when he tries to grow tentacles they are crushed by those produced by the quirk. Meanwhile, the toymaker stabs Delta's eye using a scalpel arm. His former general roars in pain and he takes advantage of this to wrap his tail around his enemy's neck and throw him away. But suddenly the solver frees himself by replacing his arms with long limbs with clawed hands. With a superhuman leap, the monster attempts to strike the hero but he ducks and punches him in the stomach with 50% of one for all. The shot sends the possessed Uzi flying through the air until it slams into the cathedral ceiling. When she falls to the ground, J and N fly over her and shoot her, but she sprouts her wings to protect herself from the bullets. This leaves an opening for Nori, who takes his pickaxe and throws it at his daughter. The pickaxe breaks through Uzi's glass face but he doesn't seem to bat an eyelid even though he steps back a few steps. Delta is about to fire his energy beam at the toymaker but he ducks and the beam hits one of the solver's limbs, severing him clean. At the same time J does the same thing with the other arm. N picks her up and throws her in the air and Nori throws the pickaxe again, causing it to cut off the head of his possessed daughter. In that moment, time stops for Izuku. He can't let the girl he loves get killed. He doesn't care that she's being controlled by some kind of malevolent digital entity. He knows she's still inside. So the green-haired human jumps towards his girlfriend and moves her out of the way of the pickaxe. The two look into each other's eyes for a few slow moments. He smiles at her and for a moment Uzi's eyes turn purple and then back to yellow. Time returns to normal and both fall to the ground. The solver gets up first and throws ninja stars at the murder drones, pinning them to the ground and tearing off N's arm. Then he hits the human with his tail, making him fall to the ground. Then the solver lunges at Nori, grabs her, and starts flying in the air before opening its jaws and preparing to devour the core. Seeing this, N opens his eyes wide, notices that he still has feeling in his arm, and quickly makes a sign with his own oil, then says, "Hey Miss Dorman, there's something you don't know." Uzi and Izuku, CYN and Nori look down and read the sign that says, "They're engaged," and J is kind of super jealous, kind of. "You traitorous piece of junk," says the pigtail drone as her cheeks flush brightly. "Wait, what do you mean jealous?" asks an extremely confused Izuku. "Seriously?" asks the bored solver as Nori turns to him and says, Uzi Dorman, you're a drone and he's a human. Before giving her a powerful slap that knocks her to the ground. After a few seconds, Uzi grabs his mother and says in his real voice, "Hey lady, I don't belong to you." While his eyes turn completely purple. Then the worker drone kicks the core which falls into the large crater. At that exact moment the toymaker stabs Delta in the chest and headbutts him, causing him to fall unconscious to the ground. Meanwhile Izuku smiles seeing that his girlfriend had come to her senses but screams when he realizes what she did to his mother. Ah Uzi. What? Didn't we talk about being disgusting and graahhhhh? The robot girl yells back as she turns to her boyfriend. That was your mom. The UA student says in panic before covering his mouth. What? Uzi asks in shock. No. Ah, screams the green-haired human. Ah. The two shout in unison as they walk towards each other before stopping and hugging each other tightly, never wanting to be apart again. What did I just see? Jay asks, raising his eyebrow after seeing the whole scene. As the two lovers embrace, Tessa's headless corpse incredibly rises up and takes Doll's corpse and his severed head. Suddenly, however, everyone turns to the living corpse as he reattached his head and removed his suit, revealing it to be made of dead skin and metal. Suddenly the figure turns to face the group revealing his yellow X-shaped pupils and says, "Oh right," being caught off guard. Then suddenly the creature makes an inhuman lunge towards Izuku and Uzi, grabbing the latter and carrying her towards the crater. The hero in training runs to save his girlfriend and catches her just before she could fall into the crater's void. From the darkness come out very long tentacles that begin to move around and one of them grabs the unconscious Delta and throws him into the void. J. N and the toymaker help Izuku get the worker drone who was looking down to stand up and then decide something. So Uzi looks his boyfriend in the eye and says, "Hey thanks for everything," and then rips his arm off and drops. Uzi no. Izuku shouts in despair as he watches his girlfriend fall into the crater. The scene shows Uzi falling through the void until he reaches a space landscape that would be an understatement to call crazy. From the core of the planet, a kind of luminous tentacle suddenly began to emerge and began to attract the various pieces of the planet towards them. At one point, the worker drone grabs onto a flying rock to avoid falling further into that hellish void. But then the robot girl sees her mother's core jumping between one floating rock and another. She tries to call it but notices that no sound comes out of its mouth, but soon after the core lands on the rock in front of her. The little being rotates the rock, revealing a sign that read, "Whoops." The words, "How do we stop him?" form on Uzi's face and his mother rolls the rock further, revealing the words, "Tails." Embarrassed, the drone girl makes a gesture that suggests she has broken it and then asks with her face, "Will he check me again?" Nori throws her daughter a necklace and rolls the rock over, revealing the words, "Only if you're a little bee ." The worker drone giggles and puts on the necklace and once done the rock rotates one last time showing the writing, "You must destroy Sin's heart," and the core summons a tape recorder and its pickaxe and the latter hands it to his daughter. She tries to catch it but is immediately hit by the pod of worker drones which takes her away from her mother. Uzi tries to climb onto the ship but is about to fall, however one of the doors opens and a black whip tentacle grabs her and pulls her in. The drone girl looks up and sees Izuku, the toymaker in front of her while N was sitting on a chair in front of the buttons while shouting satisfied, "Spaceship pilot." But his joy is cut short when he is hit in the face by Uzi who shouts, "Idiots. My mother was out there." What? Oh sorry. Oh damn what a terrible first impression I made, the UA student states in a panic only to be stopped by his girlfriend who hugs him and says, "You should have left. I would never do it without you and please don't do something like that ever again. You almost broke my heart," the human replies while holding the drone close. "How did you get this thing to work anyway?" asks the worker, pointing to the pod. "Oh, I gave you a hand. It wasn't an easy task but not impossible either," says the toymaker. Uzi looks at the scrapyard boss suspiciously and says, "Excuse me, can you remind me why he's here?" "Long story, but it doesn't matter now, the fact is he's on our side now," says Jay crossing his arms. By the way, if I remember correctly N wrote that you were jealous of me and Uzi." Izuku asks embarrassed and when he says this both Uzi and Jay blush brightly. Well, maybe let's just say that. I might have feelings for you, But like I said, right now I don't, says the pigtailed drone, but is interrupted when the roof of the pod is breached by a yellow energy tentacle. The tentacle tears the pod apart, knocking everyone inside to the ground. Izuku, Jay and Uzi fell close together and the latter says, "Anyway, I don't mind sharing or anything like that, if it's okay with you, Izu." "Wait, really?" says the pigtailed drone, and then looks at the blushing human and says, I admit I have feelings for both Uzi and you, Jay, so I don't even mind," and then smiles at her. Hearing this, Jay tears slightly as he says, "Well, yay." So the three of them hug each other, but the beautiful moment is interrupted by Uzi, who breaks away and says, "Enough with the nonsense. It's time to kill a planet." Ahahaha. So they all start falling towards the planet's core and the source of the tentacles. Meanwhile, we can now see Olbert resting on a structure on a piece of floating planet. Below him were Lizzie, Pointy, Thad and Con, who were unable to get up due to gravity. "Oh, what does that little parrot think he's doing, pecking us to death?" asks Lizzie, bored. Hearing this, Olbert growls slightly as his eyes turn from red to yellow and his body begins to mutate and grow larger. Eventually, what was a small falcon transformed into a large falcon monster. Its head was deformed, taking on a more reptilian shape with a large head, long wings and skeletal arms with clawed hands. The creature opens its beak and a rocket comes out of it and heads towards the worker drones, but it is stopped by a sentry who bites it in mid-flight and throws it into the air. While in the air, the rocket is kicked by a revived V that makes it fall on the sender, who, however, jumps back, avoiding the explosion. The murder drone flies towards the enemy and attempts to cut off his head, but he ducks and bites her hand before slamming her to the ground. But then V kicks Olbert in the face, making him step back a few steps, giving her time to get up and activate her machine gun hand. As the two fight, Lizzie looks at her phone, showing that she knew all along that the murder drone was alive. But suddenly the sentry approaches the blonde drone, who looks at Con, Pointy and Thad with a worried expression. Immediately after, the mechanical raptor bites the girl and starts shaking her. Con screams in terror. Thad takes the Uzi electromagnetic rifle while Pointy jumps on the sentry's head and hits it with his paws in the hope that it will let go of his friend. Suddenly, however, Olbert, while in the air, grabs V and throws her to the ground, causing a shock wave that sends everyone into orbit. But the sentry doesn't give up and spits out a gas canister which punctures the hole, allowing him to get close to Lizzie, who was trying to swim away. Meanwhile, V slams the bird monster against a wall, but it fires another rocket from its mouth, which the drone manages to deflect with her sword hand, which she then uses to stab the monster in the chest. In response, the monster punches her in the face, making her retreat. The murder drone attempts to attack with its pointed tail, but the enemy grabs it with its beak and rips it off, making the robot girl moan in pain. Suddenly the battle is interrupted when the two notice the toymaker, Jay, Izuku and Uzi falling from the sky, with the latter throwing a small symbol at the core while saying, "Hey Canyon, take this." Suddenly, the tentacles are blocked by an unknown force, and the group lands at the end of a long iron bridge. Uzi, Jay, and N have screen faces that reveal sunglasses. But at that moment, on the other side, the solver appears and uses Tessa's dead corpse to hold the Uzi symbol. "You dropped this, silly girl," the entity states before breaking the symbol and allowing the tentacles to continue their work. "Hello idiots, hello Jay, hello N," says the creature friendly as he approaches the group. "I understand that you don't want to talk to me because I hurt your feelings," continues the monster as it advances. Suddenly Delta appears next to Tessa's corpse, but there was something different about him. He had thicker armor, his tail had a sharper tip, he had laser cannons implanted on his back, and there were many more bright red lights on his body. "Delta?" asks the shocked toymaker as he sees his augmented former subordinate. "No longer Delta. Evil laugh, now he is Omega," Canyon says excitedly as the lizard scrapper looks up at a small fragment of planet that he disintegrates with his energy beam. However, it is better to assimilate than to explain, Tessa comments as she sprints ahead of the group and then arrives behind them and is about to stab Uzi in the back, but Izuku promptly punches her right in the face, making her step back. The toymaker stabs the strange creature with a scalpel arm but is tackled by Omega, who tears off one of his arms and sends him falling off the bridge. N jumps on the living corpse but she hits him. J tries to attack her but a scythe tentacle emerges from his back and throws her away. Once this is done, Canyon jumps on N and starts stabbing his belly. The worker drone and the human try to intervene, but Omega gets in front of them and stabs the girl with his tail. The UA student punches him using 40% of One for All, however it doesn't seem to have much effect. In fact, the scrapper looks towards the human and hits him with his arm, making him crash into the bridge railing. Meanwhile, the solver is reaching N's core, but Jay comes flying back and stabs him from behind, cutting off his tentacles and throwing her away onto his ally. So the group runs into a structure at the end of the bridge, and after running a few meters they hide behind a wall of bars. Meanwhile, we can see the toymaker fall onto a large piece of flying planet. The robot gets up and looks around trying to find a way back to the bridge, but then his attention is caught by a large black rectangle that appears out of nowhere with a flash. After a few seconds, a group of individuals wearing strange costumes emerge from the square. Ignore Izuku. Listen, our only goal is to find Midoriya and leave immediately, the adult man says. Then the toymaker and the teenagers prepare to fight. Before the robot with the tail could do anything, in the distance we hear the sound of something approaching. Everyone turns and sees in the distance an army of yellow-eyed scrap dealers marching in their direction. What the hell is going on here? Asks the girl with pink skin and hair as she looks at the army in fear. Those are my former subordinates, now controlled by a digital entity that is currently fighting with your friend. But don't worry, I'm sure he'll be fine. Right now I'd worry about the army, explains the toymaker as he turns to the iron monsters. Meanwhile, we can see the group still hiding behind the barred wall as they hear the solver transformed into a monster looking for them in the next corridor. Everyone was visibly tense, with Jay and Uzi holding hands with their boyfriend. Suddenly V's voice is heard in the distance saying, "N, are you okay there? Listen Tessa, it's Canyon and she's here. She fooled us all." The drone boy is about to say something, but Jay puts his hand over his mouth while the words, "It's a trap," appear on his face. "I'm so sorry. I should have been honest with you from the start. I was just so scared for us, for you. I didn't want anything to happen to you because I love you." Hearing this, N decides to take his hand away from his mouth and shout, "V, stop." After a couple of seconds of silence, a hand appears out of nowhere and extracts N's core, taking it and his body with it. "Do your job and I'll leave you and N alone." "Bad job V," says the solver, and then runs towards the murder drone, which runs away in terror. She tries to fly away, but Olbert appears out of nowhere and hits her, making her land next to N's lifeless corpse. Canyon exits the facility with N's core still in her hand. She giggles before opening her jaws and making to devour the tiny being, but is interrupted when the door behind her slams shut, severing the tentacles on her back. This allows the core to leap away and return to her body, which slowly reboots. The corpse looks up and sees Khan falling through the air while holding a door remote and says, "Ah, feel the power of the doors." Meanwhile, not far away, Thad throws the energy rifle into the air, shouting, "Long throw Uzi." "Eye rolling," says the entity as he jumps from the balcony, followed by Omega, and then adds, "Uzi is not here." At that moment the entire structure is surrounded by tendrils of energy that make it sink. Then the monster runs towards V and is about to attack her, but out of nowhere Jay, Izuku and Uzi appear and kick her in the face simultaneously, sending her flying. "No one traumatizes these weird robots except me. Anyway, glad to see you're not dead or anything," says the green-haired girl as she looks behind her and meets V's gaze, who smiles at her. Canyon says in that, "Boring, very boring," then tries to take control of Uzi again, which seems to work, but as soon as Izuku grabs her hand she takes over. In fact, one of the solver's pupils turns purple, which surprises him a lot. "Sorry, but I'm the only one in here. You know, I think stupid things are damn cool, and I'm free," shouts the worker drone as she picks up her mother's pickaxe that had fallen from the sky. In the distance you can see Nori falling from the sky while saying, "Kick her ass, darling." At that moment the recorder also falls to the ground and starts playing a song. Omega, Olbert, and the solver run towards the group, who run towards them. Izuku takes care of Omega, J, N and V face Olbert, while Uzi takes care of Canyon. The hero in training runs around the junkyard to dodge its energy beam, then runs towards it and jumps on its head. At that point the green-haired boy throws a punch at the enemy using 55% of One for All, which damages his arm but actually seems to inflict more considerable damage to Omega, who in fact falls to the ground. Olbert stabs Jay in the shoulder with his claws and returns the claws by wrapping his tail around his neck to throw him away. V grabs him and knocks him to the ground, and V cuts off his leg as he was getting up. Meanwhile, Uzi parries a sword blow using his pickaxe and then kicks his enemy in the stomach, who steps back slightly before responding with a scythe tentacle that the worker dodges. Omega grabs Izuku by the neck, but he kicks him in the face with 45% of his power, making him let go. Then the powered-up scrapper tries to stab the UA student with his tail, but he grabs it, but it starts spinning like a drill. Replace Kong with Izuku. Jay sees his boyfriend in trouble and decides to shoot a rocket at the lizard monster instead of the bird that was on the ground, momentarily stunned by an attack from N. The rocket hits the monster's back, which, despite being able to resist thanks to its reinforced armor, temporarily deactivates its drill-like tail. Uzi, for his part, had parried another sword blow with his pickaxe, but this time he slams his sword to the ground and then stabs his enemy straight in the chest with his wing, sending him flying. The hawk monster dodges the bullets that V fires but is knocked away by a rocket fired by N. Izuku dodges a punch from Omega, gets behind him and manages to tear off one of his shoulder pads using 47% OFA. Meanwhile, the solver begins to teleport around Uzi to confuse her, but she turns around and manages to stab him with the pickaxe, but at that moment he takes the form of Izuku, who spits blood and looks at his girlfriend in shock. Seeing this, the purple-haired drone steps back slightly, thinking that she has truly killed the love of her life. Seeing this, the mechanical hawk monster stops fighting the murder drones and flies towards the worker to strike her by surprise. The real Izuku sees this and immediately stops fighting Omega to save his first girlfriend. And luckily he manages to block Olbert's claw with his arm, and immediately after the murder drones fly past him with their sword hands unsheathed. "No more deception," says N, and immediately afterwards he cuts off his arm, V his torso, and J cuts off Olbert's head, which falls to the ground in pieces. "You know, I think we should come up with some sort of secret word or some sort of handshake," suggests the UA student as Canyon returns to her normal corpse form. Omega roars in fury as he charges the group, but Jay flies towards him and begins striking him with his sword, although he fails to penetrate the metal of his armor. Meanwhile, Uzi, Izuku, N and V fly towards Tessa's corpse, and she throws her sword at them, but the human catches it with a black whip and sends it back to the sender, impaling her with the sword. Meanwhile, the pigtailed drone parries a punch from the lizard scrapper and notices the missing armor on her right shoulder and decides to take advantage of it. In fact, she uses her free sword hand to strike that specific point, and with a quick movement she manages to cut off the enemy's entire right arm, making him roar in pain. Meanwhile, Canyon dodges several rockets fired by the murder drones, but one of them is kicked again by Uzi towards the enemy, who turns around and catches it in midair trying to throw it away, but the green-haired boy promptly fires a black whip. The green tentacles wrap around the entity's hand, preventing it from launching the missile, which explodes on top of it. The monstrous creature is thrown away by the explosion. She falls to the ground only to get up again and show that half of her face was charred, and says, "Growl of annoyance, you are extremely annoying." "Coming from you, that's a compliment," says the worker drone with a smirk. Meanwhile, Jay dodges an energy beam but is still hit in the wing, which disintegrates, causing her to fall to the ground. The scrapper crushes the murder drone's chest and prepares to disintegrate its head with his beam, but is stopped when a green beam passes through his side, passing through his chest and exiting on the other side. The beam had come from Uzi with his rifle fallen from the sky, which he held using the mouth of his tail. Omega shakes for a moment before falling to the ground as the red lights go out. So Jay gets up and says, "Thanks nerd, that was pretty close," and then flies towards them to cut off Sin's head, who quickly puts it back on and hits the flying drone with a tentacle. But immediately after, Izuku runs towards her and hits her right in the face with 30% of One for All. The living corpse steps back and then strikes the human with a scythe tentacle, but V steps in front and parries the blow with a sword hand before kicking the enemy in the stomach. The purple-haired drone comes up behind the solver and bites her neck with its tail, which it then uses to slam her to the ground. The enemy quickly gets back up and starts teleporting around to confuse the group. At one point the enemy appears behind N and V and with a quick swipe of a sickle tentacle throws them away. Now the demonic entity watches Izuku, Jay and Uzi, who were at the beginning of the bridge, and with a chuckle starts teleporting randomly to confuse them. At a certain point the monster lunges towards the trio, but they realize it is a trap, and so they turn around and put their hand forward. In fact, Canyon teleports in front of them but is pierced by the hands of her enemies. With a quick movement, the trio pulls their hands back, and we can see that in Uzi's hand is the core of the solver, wriggling and trying to free itself. End of theme music. Goodbye solver, it looks like you were the one taken by surprise this time, Izuku says triumphantly. Immediately after, Uzi shouts, "Bite me." He activates a solver symbol that creates a huge hole in the planet, allowing sunlight to shine directly on the core. The core, amidst cries of pain, disappears, leaving behind only a floating black sphere. Suddenly the black sphere expands and everything on the planet seems to stop, except for the three who watch in horror as Tessa's corpse continues to move. It grabbed Uzi's hand and tried to swallow the black sphere. Before Jay or Izuku could do anything, Uzi brings the sphere to his mouth and swallows it, shocking everyone, even Canyon himself. Soon after, everything goes back to normal and the solver's corpse begins to melt until it disappears completely. Soon after, the worker drone falls to her knees as her eyes quickly turn from yellow to purple, then back to yellow and back to purple again. Suddenly a kind of shock wave hits everyone in the area, knocking them out. Izuku woke up with a start and looked around, noticing his two robot girlfriends on the ground. Jay was slowly getting up, as was Uzi, who, however, kept his head down. The human helps his girlfriend up and asks, "Uzi, is that you?" Fearing that the solver had taken control again, the worker drone looks up to see the hero in training, who notices that half of his eyes were yellow while the other half were purple. Quickly both V and CH point their guns at the other drone, but she promptly looks at herself in the mirror using N's face. "Oh, I'm a damaged OC," Uzi says in her usual tone, proving it was still her. So the UA student hugs and kisses her, which she obviously reciprocates. Jay watches the scene with a slight smile, but suddenly after he finishes with Uzi, he also gives a kiss to the murder drone, who after a few seconds of initial shock returns the kiss. N and V look at each other for a few seconds, with the former asking awkwardly, "D, do you think D we should, why no?" But is interrupted when V grabs his face and smashes it against hers, enveloping him in a hot kiss. Meanwhile, we can see Khan, Lizzie and Thad climbing a crater, being very careful not to fall. But suddenly the leader of the worker drones slips and is about to fall into the void, but is stopped by a solver symbol that lets him land safe and sound. He looks down and sees Nori's core looking at him with an expression that radiated a lot of nervousness. "Thank you," says the robot man, but suddenly the woman he doesn't know as his wife screams, "You don't know me and I hate you," and then runs away screaming, scared of facing her husband. Khan is silent for a few seconds as he scratches his chin before saying in a confused voice, "That was quite attractive." But soon after Thad and Lizzie manage to reach the surface, the school bus driven by the sentry appears out of nowhere and starts chasing them. Return to our heroes. While our heroes were having a good time, they didn't notice that a few meters away from them Omega had gotten up again. The scrapper growls in hatred and then charges his energy beam to surprise his enemies, especially the human. The group notices the mechanical lizard and prepares to fight it, but before the beam is fired, something happens. Suddenly a human figure jumps in front of the monstrous robot, and immediately after an ice stalagmite stabs the monster's chest from behind, killing it. Everyone looks at the figure in shock except Izuku, who seems to recognize it and asks, "Todoroki?" The figure turns around to show that he is a teenager with white and red hair and a scar over one eye, who says, "I'm glad to see you're okay, Midoriya." Soon after, the entire class along with Aizawa and the toymaker run towards the group shouting, "Midoriya, nerd, Izuku, Deku, problem child, Midobro." As soon as Deku reaches the class, he is hugged by his entire class except Bakugo. In particular, Ochako Uraraka held him tightly through tears as she said, "Deku, I thought I would never see you again." Seeing this, Uzi and Jay growl in unison and push the brunette human away. "Hands off, big cheeks, he's ours." The purple-haired drone shouts possessively as she and the murder drone kiss their boyfriend's cheeks. All the members of class open their eyes wide and scream in unison, "What? Are you kidding me? What does Midoriya have that I don't?" Minoru Mineta comically complains. "The fact that he's not a pervert, for example," Tsuyu Asui comments harshly. "Problem child, I think you owe us some explanation about what happened in this world," Aizawa says. But suddenly Omega wakes up and charges his energy beam again but is stabbed in the throat by Pointy, who then pierces his eye with another paw, tearing it out. Just to be safe, the UA student comments, then runs over to Omega's corpse and punches his head off, then grabs it and throws it into the air. After catching his breath, the training hero turns to his friends and girlfriends and says, "So, where do I start?" Hour later, we can see Mei Hatsume's laboratory in a complete mess with Mei herself, Nezu All Might and an extremely worried Inko in the center. Hours have already passed. What if something happened? Asks the green-haired woman. Don't worry, Miss Midoriya, I'm sure Aizawa and his students will be back soon with your son by their side, says the humanoid mouse. At that precise moment the large pod reappeared in the center of the room, raising everyone's hopes. The black box opens and the first to come out is the missing green-haired boy. As soon as she sees her son, Inko's eyes light up and with a sudden movement she wraps her child in a tight, warm hug which he returns. "Oh Izuku, my child. I thought I lost you forever. Please don't disappear into another dimension ever again. I don't think my heart could handle it," the woman begs through tears. "I'm sorry Mom, I promise I'll never disappear again," says the green-haired boy. "Oh Midoriya, I'm so sorry. I should have checked my baby better. I was so careless," Mei says, abandoning her usual cheerful tone. "Don't worry Mei, it wasn't that bad in the end," says the hero in training while still being held by his mother. "Thank goodness you're fine, young Midoriya, but if you don't mind, I'd like to have a little chat with you. You know, I'd like to know what the universe was like where you ended up," says a smiling Nezu. "Of course, Mr. Principal, but first, I'd like to introduce you to some people. You can leave now, girls," says the hero in training, turning to the pod. Soon after, two robot girls emerged from the machine and stood next to the human. "Izuku L, who are they?" asks the hero's mother as she looks at the two robots who were staring at her and smiling. "Mom, Principal, All Might, meet Uzi and Jay. My girlfriends," says the UA student grabbing the hips of the mechanical girls. "Hello, mother-in-law," the two drones say in unison, even though you could tell they were a little nervous. All Might spits blood, Inko faints and falls to the ground while Nezu seems unfazed and says, "Nice to meet you." Time after, we can now see the green-haired boy lying on his dorm bed, with Jay to his right and Uzi to his left resting peacefully in the crook of their boyfriend's neck. But suddenly Uzi's tail turns yellow and he starts speaking with the solver's voice. "So, awkward silence, what will you name the kids?" Soon after, the smiles of all three disappear, replaced by a frown. "Oh, some ideas, processing completed, if female Canyon Jr. or Tessie. If male Solver or Destruction, Propone Canyon." After finishing speaking, the hero in training punches the head of the tail with 30% of the One for All, detaching it completely. "Ouch," says the head as it falls into a wastebasket full of paper, bringing back silence and peace. "To be honest, Tessie isn't a bad name," says Jay. "Yes," comments Uzi. "I think so too," adds Izuku. Fine. We can see two worker drones walking the now safe snow-covered streets of Copper 9. Worker drone. Satisfied sigh. "I'll tell you Carl, it's really satisfying to finally be able to call this planet ours." Carl. Well it's not technically ours Tom. Khan and his apparently not so dead wife made a peace treaty with the toymaker about sharing the planet, so it's not 100% ours. Tom. Rolls his eyes. Details, I meant we're finally free. No killer drones hunting us, no scrap dealers trying to tear us apart, no planet breaking down and rebuilding itself. We're completely safe. But suddenly something large fell from the sky at great speed and crashed into Tom's head, tearing it off from the rest of his neck which fell to the ground. Carl. Shocked. "Oh my robo-god. What the hell?" The camera focuses on the object that fell from the sky and it turns out to be the head of Delta Omega, which was smoking because it had just fallen from the atmosphere of Copper 9 and ended up on the cold snow. Carl. He approaches the body. Tom. Why are you still there? Suddenly the head still intact eye glows red and the cables from his severed head join together and connect with those in Tom's neck. Carl watches with his optics wide in horror as his friend's corpse slowly rises from the ground with the wrecker's head on its neck. Omega looks at his new drone hands and then looks at Carl with the same look a predator has when it finds its prey. Carl. Maybe it's time for me too. But before he could finish his sentence, Omega opened his jaws and fired his energy beam at the worker drone, reducing it to ashes. Having done this, the scrapper looks around and can see the entrance to the worker drone colony in the distance. Omega let out a growl of hatred and began walking towards the colony with only one goal in mind. Revenge against that stupid green-haired human boy. Izuku slowly opened his eyes and saw the ceiling of his dorm room, something he had vowed to never take for granted again after his time on Copper 9. Immediately the UA student felt the now familiar and pleasant sensation of two pairs of arms wrapped around him. Izuku turned to his right and saw Jay still in sleep mode snuggled against him, then turned to his left to see Uzi in the same state as Jay. The green-haired boy smiled tenderly at both of his robot girlfriends. It had been almost a month since the, in Uzi's words, super cool, mind-blowing, and absolutely nightcore final battle against Canyon, Omega, and the Absolute Solver, and things seemed to be going well. Uzi and Jay had happily transferred to Izuku's dimension, which meant they'd be attending UA so they could be with him. After a few seconds Uzi seemed to come out of sleep mode and as soon as she realized she was being watched by Izuku she blushed and looked away. Uzi. Embarrassed. You know better than to look at me like that soppy way. Izuku. Chuckles. I know, but I really can't help it. Smiles. Not with you. Uzi. Blushes. Hides face with covers. Bite me. Jay. Do you realize that saying this when you're in bed with your two lovers can come across as extremely sexual? They both turned and saw that Jay had also become active and was sitting up watching them. Uzi simply grunted in annoyance and got up from the bed to head to the bathroom to change out of his pajamas. Izuku and Jay looked at each other and chuckled together, amused by the purple-haired drone's reaction. Izuku gets out of bed. So Jay, are you ready for today's test? It's your first real test. Jay gets out of bed. Absolutely yes. Takes off his pajamas. I have thoroughly studied all the topics. Opens a drawer and takes out a UA student's shirt. And although I seriously have some issues with our teacher's skills, I'm pretty sure it will be fine. At that moment Uzi also came out of the bathroom wearing her UA uniform. Uzi. Yeah, I never thought I'd start missing Lizzie's dad. Izuku. He remembers something about Lizzie. Do you remember that the visit is finally coming today? This visit would have been an event in which V, N, Lizzie, Thad, and other representatives of Copper 9 would visit the UA. The discovery of the existence of another dimension obviously shocked and perplexed the public, especially when information leaked that humanity in that universe had been exterminated and only sentient robots, or rather, drones, remained. But this visit would have been a perfect opportunity to fully establish a peaceful relationship and open the doors to a possible collaboration between humans and drones. Uzi. I wonder how V and N are doing. Jay. Yeah, those two had always been close since the mansion days. But at that moment Uzi's tail activated and his eyes glowed with an all too familiar yellow light. Mischievous smile, today is the party. Izuku. He looks at her badly. First, it's not a party but a visit. Jay. He looks at her badly. Second, it's nothing that concerns you. Uzi. Grabs her and glares at her. And third, you dare pull one of your so-called pranks, and I swear to Robo-God, we'll find a way to get rid of you once and for all. I roll my eyes, whatever, I snort bored. At this point, Uzi's tail died. Yes, this was still a stain on the good life Izuku was living with Jay and Uzi. Canyon or Absolute Solver, the digital entity hadn't been completely defeated but trapped in Uzi's tail. Which made things extremely difficult when the bitch decided to make commentary. The three lovers promised each other that they would find a way to destroy the murderer of humanity once and for all, but for now all they could do was endure it. After Izuku changed into his school uniform, the three left their room and headed to the main room of Dormitory 2A. Most of the class was already there and they all turned to the three. Ochako. Good morning, Deku, Jay, and Uzi. We've already made you breakfast. Uzi. He nods at her. Thanks Ok. He grabs a cup with some oil in it. Jay. Grabs another cup of oil and walks over to Momo. Hey Yayorzu, thanks again for those notes on early quirk users. Momo. He smiles at her, of course. Izuku ate his breakfast and smiled as he watched his girls interacting amicably with his friends. It was refreshing to see the close friendships that had formed during Uzi and Jay's month-long stay at UA. Seeing them interact was undeniable proof that peace between humans and drones and possibly even scrappers was possible. After breakfast, the class left the dorm and headed toward the main building. Jay briefly glanced at the morning sun and smiled at it. With the Solver's new powers, Uzi had managed to alter the nature of the murder drones, ensuring that the sun no longer harmed them. In theory, they no longer even needed to drink oil, but since it tasted quite good to them, Uzi simply reversed the overheating and made it so that the murder drones no longer needed the specific oil used by worker drones. We can now see the group entering classroom 2A where Aizawa was already sitting at the desk. Aizawa. Usual monotonous tone. Good morning class, as you know today we have quizzes on the history of heroes, are there any volunteers? Quick as lightning Jay raised his right hand before anyone else could. Aizawa. All right Miss J. Tell me about the first hero of the United Kingdom. As Jay spoke with extreme care and wisdom about a British hero with a ridiculous name, Uzi's tail perked up and ducked under Uzi's desk so as not to be noticed. Once hidden, Canyon projected a digital screen with her eyes that said in huge letters, Alternative Infection Energy Unlocked, Zombie Revenge Night, Project Update Now Possible. The Absolute Solver smiled in his tail-tip form. Finally, after a whole month of trying to regain any power under the noses of those three stupid lovebirds, Canyon can finally regain control and start all over again in this new universe. Giggle, Canyon said pleasedly. After class ended, Uzi, Izuku, Jay, and Professor Aizawa headed to Mei Hatsume's lab and found Principal Nezu, All Might, and of course Mei working on the portal machine. Nezu. Look at the 4 inches O. Just in time, young Mei says the connection will happen soon. Izuku. Smiles, well. Mei. Work on the keyboard, okay. It's happening. Soon after the machine began to shake, after another few seconds the door opened and a familiar male murder drone emerged. Izuku. Happy, N. Excited, Izuku. N immediately ran to the green-haired boy and gave him a big hug. Once the hug is broken, N looks at Jay and Uzi and goes to hug them too. Jay. Don't even try that. Uzi. Hell no. N. Walks away and laughs nervously. Hey, okay. Hey, that's my idiot. Everyone turned and saw V coming out of the building with his arms crossed but a mischievous smile on his face. Next to her was the raptor sentinel that V had renamed Sparky, who was, we could say, her pet. Izuku. So, how are things going between you? V simply grabbed N by the dress and gave him a deep, passionate kiss. V. Breaks the kiss, need I say more? N. Blush and with a stupid smile on your face, P please do it. Get a room. The owner of this voice was Lizzie, who was the next to emerge from the machine, followed by Thad, the skull-shaped junkyard worker Pointy, the professor who, as always, didn't look like he wanted to be there, the toymaker, a few anonymous drones except for one with a hood on, and finally Khan, with Nori clinging to his shoulder. Still in the form of Core. Khan. Raises hands in the air, human greetings. Approaches Nezu. I am Khan Dorman. Leader of the worker drones. Points to Nori on his shoulder, husband of this lovely lady, and points to Uzi, father of this incredible and absolutely emo girl. Uzi. Blushes and looks away. Dad. Nezu. Shakes his hand. Greetings Mr. Dorman, I am Nezu, principal of this school, and these two, points to Aizawa and All Might, are Shota Aizawa and Toshinori Yagi, the two main teachers. Aizawa and All Might. Sav. Nori. Neutral tone, sup. The toymaker. Greetings, glorious humans. Khan. I really hope this cultural encounter will be enlightening for us. Do you remember something? Oh, I almost forgot. Pull out a manual, a little gift for you. Nori. Open your eye and glare at Khan. Did you bring him? Khan. Of course, every good deal starts with a gift. Hands the book to Nezu. Uzi. Look at the book, oh no. Izuku. Look at her, what? Uzi. Whisper to Izuku, if that book is what I think it is, my dad is about to make us look like shit. Nezu accepts the book and examines it, reading the cover. Nezu. A manual on doors. Nori and Uzi. Uzi. Damn, I knew it. V. He whispers to her in a provocative tone, are you sure that's actually your father? Uzi. Murder. Khan. Yes, doors are, we could say, a family tradition, we are all passionate about doors. Use. Lizzie. Thad. Pointy. Sparky. All other drones. The toymaker. Just to clarify, Indica Khan, he does not represent me or my people. The professor. Thinking, I have to ask for a raise, they don't pay me enough for this. Nezu. Keep smiling the same way, thank you so much for the gift, I really appreciate the thought. Khan. So. Puts his hands on his hips, what do we do now? Nezu. We'll take a tour now, but unfortunately the upper levels still don't feel safe enough to let you tour Matsudafu City. For now, you can visit Ua, which is a major attraction in the city and Japan in general. The toymaker. It would be an honor for me, it's been a long time since I last saw a human attraction with my optics, the drones have tried to replicate with poor results. Khan. Slightly offended. Hey, we're not that bad with monuments. A few weeks before, we can see some worker drones clustered around a strange and ugly rusty metal statue that tries to resemble a human silhouette. Presenter drone. And this, gentlemen, is the first official monument to Copper 9, the Rusty Man. After a few seconds, however, the entire statue collapses into 1,000 pieces. Returning to the present, Nori. No darling, we are. Meanwhile, Canyon carefully observed and scanned all the drones in the room until she noticed the hooded one that seemed to be staring back at her. The living tail notices that under the hood you can see 2 pairs of blood-red eyes, but they are not the eyes of a worker drone, no. Those are the eyes of a scrapper Canyon knew very well. Canyon smiled and started typing something. A small screen formed before Delta Omega's eyes as he read. Message. Missed you, smile with tongue. I'm planning revenge, do you want to join? The undercover scrapper remained silent but nodded his head in agreement. This will be more fun, giggle. At that point Canyon began to look around again and set her gaze on Lizzie, identifying her as the perfect patient zero. Quickly, the toothed tail stretched out and reached the leg of the drone with the phone and with an extremely rapid movement, it gave her a bite on the calf and with the same speed retreated. Lizzie. Ouch. Look at Pointy. Pointy. What did we say? No more biting, you're cooler than this. The little scrapper, who hadn't seen anything, looks at his friend, mistress with confusion, but the drone girl ignores her and goes back to looking at her phone, ignoring the strange feeling in her code. Canyon observes the scene and then looks at Izuku, Canyon, and Jay, smiles, and then looks back at Delta Omega and nods. He nods slowly and retreats. The fun is about to begin. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we will see you in the next video.